Hey guys, Kasal here. You're about to watch Thorin talk and talk and talk. But it's kind of good, I swear.
Right, this is going to be another episode of Strat Book, here with LEGIJA, of course, and we're joined by karrigan, in-game leader of mousesports, formerly of FaZe Clan, formerly of Astralis /TSM /Dig. Well, you get the point. Used to be a player back in 1.6 and actually alt people and move and, had fucking skills. I'm honest, I promise, he really was. He was pretty good. How you doing, mate?
I'm doing good. What about you guys?
Listen, I would guess you are one of the most requested guests to be on this show, mate. Because here's the thing. Even though you do interviews and stuff like that, people want to know, I will say, here's a problem with my style of how I do stuff, is when I'm on desks, I only have 30 seconds to talk. So obviously I don't have time to I don't do telestration sessions. I ain't got time to break down everything I'm saying. I have to use sort of simple phrasing and say things like, karrigan's really good at a loose style of play. And so the problem with that is when people get to know it, they will repeat it as well, but they don't know what that means. So actually on this episode, one thing I'm hoping we can do is dive into some of your philosophy on the game, how you call the game, etc. Because one thing I want to set up, okay, is the reason I said that about the fact that I feel like I've actually contributed, even though I was doing it where I know what that means, I feel like I've sort of contributed to a myth about your style of play, which is because when you were in the FaZe Clan team, which unfortunately is the one that the newer fans are going to remember because they won't remember when you were in Astralis before that, because it's 4+5 years ago at this point in time, they're going to think, right, well, because the other idiot analysts, I never said this once, mate, the other analysts used to go, FaZe Clan is a team of 5 fraggers who are all just playing and they took the word loose, but they took it in the bad way. They took it as though it just meant it's an FPL game. You run around, you just shoot people in the head. So they never understood, why is it a big deal that karrigan left? Or they really did think the meme, all you did at the beginning of the round in spawn was Nico, go kill. Whereas what I used to try to explain to them was, actually, if you look at the teams before that, when he was in TSM, when he was in FaZe Clan where it was Alu and Kiyashima, more role player elements that you can use, that definitely wasn't an insanely loose team. It wasn't set strats from spawn. It wasn't existence and old school God B and stuff. But for me, you were always the person who married those two styles, you had players, but then the loose aspect was kind of the idea you can change it up on the fly, right? You can do something. Give us some thoughts on this, because it's a pretty big topic, but obviously that's the whole point of the show. We can get into this.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what you're actually saying, right? I've always focused on whatever lineup I have or whatever team, whatever players I have. I try to coach the person and how can I use the person the best way in a team. It's not about how I learned the guy to play Counter-Strike, because everybody at this level knows how to play, right? They might not know a few stuff, how to move as a team and rotate. And that's what I try to bring together in a team. I want specific rotates or specific moves when I create gaps or something, or I see something, people have to react. If I say jump through a smoke, people should do it, because that's something I saw in my demo. So that's why sometimes it looks really random what we're doing, but the thought process behind it is pretty big. It's about one small thing I saw in a demo, and therefore it can seem very loose sometimes.
You also don't have time to explain it in the moment, right? You have to just sort of make the call and they have to trust you.
Exactly, because often I would be the first guy to jump through smoke, right? If I jump through smoke by saying he's crazy, I'm going with him, you lead by example. Plus the second a young guy has to jump through smoke, he has, let's say, 0-8 in score, and he has to jump through it. Another duel he's not getting, he does
sure.
Right? So if I jump through first, he will refrag me, he'll get in situation. So it really depends on what team and players I have in my team. Obviously, FaZe Clan in the end with Olaf, Nico, Guardian, and Rain was a team where I felt the most important thing was to get in the 3-3s. Because in every single 3-3s, if you look at the lineup, at the players, experience, aim-wise, understanding of the game, we should win those rounds.
Yes.
Because that moment doesn't have to come down to really good communication. It's about how you play off your teammate. And if you look at those players, how we played as a team in these clutch scenarios, we were always good. We were not like a Astralis level where we were connected or flashing really good, but we understood when to do the right peek and when not to, right? So, especially in that lineup, it was about creating these patterns of how we could move as a team, and then suddenly switch it up, like you say, with a really loose style and execute in that way. Because for me, it was important, how could I activate Nico in the best way? How could I get Guardian to get the opening? And how could I set Rain up to really perform good? Because for me, the key opponent in that good FaZe Clan was Rain. if you could have Rain playing a good game, his impact was the biggest of all players in the team. So I knew if I'm always first guy in, I know Rain is going to refrag me, because at that moment in 2017, 18, he had one of the most crisp aim. He was like a third type of guy. So if he died first and I should refrag, I think it wasn't good enough. And also in that moment, it's in 4-on-4, 3-on-3. I'd rather have my teammates at that point be in that scenario, because they would do the right call based on all the information they gather, right? In mousesports, it's different because of the experience and how people move. They need more guidance and micromanage. So it often depends on the person and the team and the players. And therefore, you also see with Astralis, it was a different style, because the initiative in Astralis wasn't good as I wanted back then. It was still a team with a lot of confidence issues, I would say. They have been really good, obviously, last 4 or 5 years, but they were not at that level when I had them.
Yes.
And I think Astralis is a different level at that point, because everybody has a really high understanding of the game at this point in 2020, right? So what I always try to do is coach the person. That's how I look at it, and I see how can I make this player perform 5% better in my system, and that's what I always try to focus on. Because if you make everybody perform 5% better, and a team plays maybe only 10% worse, you get a really good performance out of all players. And sometimes in the end, it's all about, right? If all players are performing good, you win as a team. But you can also go the other way. If everybody plays as a unit, you play really good as well. And I think that's what happened in Big in a period of time. They played really great as a unit. And Astralis have obviously played good as a unit and individually, right? So, like I said, the loose style and my style often depend on what I have and what kind of pieces in my team.
Do you want to get on this, LEGIJA?
Yeah, I have a question. Do you micromanage a lot your team, or do you let them like play fairly loose and let them do their thing, and then you make the call?
In FaZe Clan, I didn't. I think in the beginning of the FaZe Clan, I did with the Alu, Kyushima, and Icy. I still think there was some things that needed more help in the game. But obviously, in the other team, it was to make the players happy. It was not about me or how I wanted to play the game. It was about how they saw the game, and I had to try to make them understand that we understand me. We have to adapt, because it was a hard team to call for. And I think everybody who played standing with us kind of had a feeling on, okay, there's a lot of voices in the team. If it goes good, nobody really talks. But if it goes bad, it goes really fast, and that we should have done something else, right? So in mouse, I micromanage way more I've done the past 4 or 5 years. Because it's a different team, right? Some players don't need to micromanage, but some other players I need to guide them in a round, or when I'm doing something, I just tell them to jump through a smoke, stuff like that, because at this moment they don't really understand what exactly I mean and how I want them to play. So I have to do that sometimes, and that's also why sometimes in mousesports my level in really can be bad, and I'm just micromanaging even more to get more out of the players, right? Because you need to play as a unit, and I think I need to do that in mousesports, and at some point I hope during the months I don't need to do it when I understand how I'm thinking and how I want to play as a team. But here in beginning, and I think beginning all teams I micromanage, but it kind of let go when everybody understand how to react as a team.
One of the things I always was complimentary about your style with, because again, this isn't something that every in-game leader has. Like, there's some in-game leaders where they're amazing at tactics and stuff like that, but as a result, you become like a slave to their system. You must do every single part of what they want, otherwise it won't work. And then at the end, they'll just say, well, you didn't do what I told you to do. One thing it seems, kind of like what you're answering there, I know from talking to you, is like you're saying, when you think about your star players, you're thinking about, right, what does he like to do? Like, where is he successful? Like, what is he comfortable? And then it's like, this is one of the reasons I've always speculated as to why you like to sometimes have a loose element in the game, is because then you can read, right, here's where I can set him up for an awesome duel at somewhere. Maybe it could be like the mid on Mirage or something, or I can isolate this area on Cash and let's just let my best player take a close range duel with like a guy who's just an okay player with an M4. Like, we're going to win that. And your philosophy, I remember talking about on the maps that are very loose, like the ones I'm talking about, Mirage, Cash, your philosophy was like, if I can set that up and we can just keep hitting that over and over again and we're just winning 5, 6, why would I stop? Why wouldn't I just keep milking it till that's dry, and then we'll try something else? Like, it's because, you know, another thing about in-game leaders is if you're a really great mind, that can become ego. There's an in-game, I used to tell Happy this, there's a star player ego, there's an in-game leader ego, where you also want to win and you want everyone to know it was you who called the most brilliant strat, like, all this rotation. So what do you think about that angle? Because that's kind of like, it's not really talked about much, the idea of how you set your stars up or how you even just turn them loose sometimes.
I mean, I think it's part of in-game your job is to always be in the background, especially if you win. I think honestly here with mouz compared to all of my teams, I got a lot more credit than I've done in FaZe Clan or whatever, because the pieces I had in my team, right, is different. But in FaZe Clan was often, if it went good, somebody went off, but nobody is watching the demon see how he went off. Was it because he was trading good? Was it because the way we took map control, he could backstab or stuff like that, right? And I think it never really goes to my mind. I obviously have confidence in myself when I'm doing good calls or finding good strategies. But it's about winning, and I don't really care if I'm playing good or bad or if I get the credit or not. As long as my team is happy, because the moment the team is happy, I know everything else is safe. It doesn't matter about criticism from the community or the casters. But if my team trusts me, I know I can do whatever I need to do in the team, and I call whatever, and everybody will follow the lead, right? But the problem obviously comes if the critics goes to the players and they start saying, well, this karrigan guy's not doing good, and they start doubting me, then it's hard to win that trust, right? And that was one of the issues I had in FaZe, where they told me after we won Sydney, they wanted to replace me. And at that moment, I knew everything from now on would be evaluated. If we lost that game, the pressure would mount on me, right? So at that moment, once you get to hear this, that you kind of on the line, as an in-game leader, that's very tough, and I think nobody's really gonna come through it on the other side really, really safe, because you start second-guessing yourself, right? And in mousesports, I know I have to trust more the players, the organization, the coach we had. We don't have it anymore, but when it comes down to that, I think I don't really care about my ego in that way. Often, I obviously have one impact in the game, but for me, it's impact how we move as a team and how we move forward, and not about anything else.
This is obviously a brutal question, but listen, mate, I made a whole career off these. Right? Obviously, one thing fans will never get, it's a good fucking great statement, isn't it, LEGIJA? It's it, right? One thing fans will never understand is every pro player, the reason they sound in interviews like they give an excuse is like, oh, you know, we just lost like an equal in the game, or if we'd have done this right, is because really, with their mindsets, like, they can be very fragile. So, like, one round can just totally change, not just that game, but the next 2 months. So, obviously, in your career, the one everyone thinks about is if you win one more round, you would have won the Boston Major. If you'd won the Boston Major, right, in theory, maybe the other tournaments could go the same. But, like, don't you think that would have changed this angle of, like, if the players trust you? If they, like, that'd create a very special memory in their mind they could at least go back to, right?
Yeah, I think yes and no. I think it was more, I've said that multiple times now, I think more it was the Katowice final right after the Boston made that hurt a lot.
Ah, okay.
There was where Flusher went off.
Yes.
And we kind of lost in the same way, in a random way, where we sit after the game like, how did this happen, right? I think the biggest issue was us. Like, if you look at those 6 months, right, from before Major to Katowice, we were like in 10 finals or something like this.
Yep.
We won 5 of them. And what more can you expect, right? Because you lose to 5 different teams who has a peak one tournament, disappears completely, right? And that happens in Counter-Strike. But if you're consistently top 4 in the final, you should not lose confidence by losing some stupid finals, because that's going to happen.
Yes.
Sometimes there is luck involved in CS. One key round, like you say, but sometimes it comes down to 4 key rounds where we misplayed or pressure mounts or we played bad tactical or whatever, right? But I think the main issue was in FaZe was when Olof went out of the lineup, we stagnated. We didn't know how long time we would stay with Exist. It was 1 to 2 months. Okay, we practice a little. You don't improve as a team. We change roles. Then Olof comes back. 2 days later, he's not coming back. Then we get Kroman in. Again, we don't practice. I think at that moment...
Brazil.
Yeah, we win Brazil somehow. We won Sydney somehow, you know. There was still confidence in the team. But we didn't move forward. Like, we didn't have a new playbook. The roles changed so much during those tournaments and the way we played CS, right? And I think if you're out of a team and you don't move forward for 5-6 months, the meta changes way too much, man. What worked a few months ago won't work now if you come back in the lineup. And if Olof's break was depending on if we won Katowice or the Major, I can't answer that. it could have been a factor, but I still think with so good results, it shouldn't have been a factor. If he needed a break, he probably took it anyway. If he would have been number one in the world, because we were still number one in the world until April or May or something like this, until he left the team. So I think that was the issue, and also Robin wasn't really coaching us so much. So I was sitting alone with 4 big players, and I had to kind of coach them. And if there was something going in the team, he wasn't there to have my back to relax the guys and stuff like that. I have talked with them already, Robin, and back then, that he wasn't there really mentally because something in his family as well. So I was left deep in shit in FaZe. Like basically, I was all alone with big players, not big egos in that way, but if they want to have something to say, they could say it. I didn't really have someone to back me up. And I also think Guardian mentioned that we as a team didn't stand together. They didn't try to help me. How could we improve the meta, right? Because often you need someone else to kind of guide you in a way as an in-game leader, because sometimes you lose track. And especially with stand-ins, because I play to win the tournament with a stand-in. I don't play our normal things. I come up with new ideas with a stand-in because Croman is not an Olof player, so suddenly I was playing Olof role doing a tournament without practice. It was something like that because I knew it didn't work with him in that role. So stuff like that also made me out of my comfort zone, but I just did it for the tournament instead of thinking about my stats or how I could play better in VGD. I just did everything for us to win those tournaments.
And there you can see actually how much impact you can have as a style of in-game leading that you have.
Yes.
You basically have like Chrome and you get him in your team. I think, how much days did you have with him?
3 days practice.
3 days practice.
That's insane.
You guys win Brazil. You win another tournament. And now imagine you had a in-game leader like Existence was, for example, a guy who's like way more strategical and like set plays way more instead of this loose and micromanaging style. It would be impossible to win a tournament, I personally think.
Yeah, agree.
Not impossible, obviously, anything can happen, but I believe like the chances would be way lower. So just credits to you.
When you say that, like, yeah, go on.
It was a really strange scenario, right? Because I was like, okay, let's just try to. I have no idea about Chrome. I never met him. I have never seen him play. He played a heroic. We saw his stats. Okay, he's available. Let's just take him for. I think it was 2 tournaments actually. We had 2 or 3 days practice to ECS. Went to tournament, kind of shit the bed there, and we had to go straight to Brazil. And we had to decide during the ECS tournament, did we want to go with Croman or not? But we couldn't find others, so we went with Croman. And I think the first map we played in official, I just swapped him with my position. I was like, okay, this guy's going in first. He has insane mechanics, but his awareness and communication is not on point. So what we're going to do is just put him in together with Rain, so with the Norwegian combo going in with really good aim. And I was just playing kind of support role, knowing all the nades, because as an in-game leader, you kind of know all nades on the map. You know how you want this position to be played, right? So I just start doing that. So I was like in-game leading lurking. And it was so strange to play that role because it was so different for me, but it worked in that matter that we were unpredictable. And obviously, it was easy for Chromatus to rush in a Mirage. Execute, he runs first, right? There's no decision to be made. It's just your pathway, how you clear sight. And everybody with good mechanics and pro scene knows how to do that. So it was difficult, but also fun and experimental. But it also hurt me in the end because then I had to go back in my old role again. And it just changes everybody how they see the game, right? And like I said, I just do everything to win with the piece I have at this moment. And not about how do we win a tournament in 8 months. It's not about make it short term because that's about confidence in the team.
That's also when you said before, like not big egos, but like obviously they had big voices. When I say like star player ego, I don't necessarily mean it's a bad thing, by the way. Like sometimes I want my star player to have a big fucking, he's the best player. Like, you know, I want him to think he's right and he knows what he's doing and he knows that he wants to be put in this situation. But the problem is in your team, in that FaZe clan in particular, because obviously we'll go to some of the other teams later. On this FaZe clan in particular, every player you were playing with in that lineup in a past team was like the best player. So they're used to being in a position where if they have an idea, well, of course they're going to listen to me. I'm the best player. So if you have 4 people like that, first of all, you can never make all 4 happy at all times. You're always having to do some compromise. Someone's going to have to sacrifice. As you said, essentially, the obvious thing to do is just sacrifice even more yourself. But then that can hurt because since you want some of them to just focus on what they're doing, they're not going to even notice what you're sacrificing sometimes. So then they're going to think, well, I played great. Oh, it was him. Look, he fucking sucked in the game. It's like, brother, I'm giving everything to make you good. Like, I know I don't, like, obviously you don't want to be egotistical and tell them all the time, look what I'm doing for you. Because that sounds fucked up too, but it's why when they can turn real quick, right? Like, one night it can just be over.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I also learned some of FaZe, right? Because I was always playing with FAMAS or SMG, basically the Sanji style. And sometimes really playing alone on a side beam rush, it's okay to SMG, but if you never have an AK, I dropped AK every round to Nico, Rain, or Olaf when I was CT. Because I felt like, okay, they just do instant one tap, right? And then maybe I'll use a spray, but sometimes it's way easier to hold a side with an AK because you kill the first guy faster than an M4, right? Small stuff like this I stopped doing in mouse because I also need to perform at my spot in my positions because I can't sacrifice myself so much like I did in FaZe. I felt in the end I wasn't even playing like in that matter, right? I was trying to make the right calls. I focused way too much on that instead of focusing on myself. And when it really hurt me was when I went to Envy for like these 2 months. I couldn't get out of that loop of even if it had not the same players at all,
Right.
I was still in this sacrifice mentality. And by playing in Envy, I really realized you cannot get to the top level. You still have this mentality. You need also to make sure you need to work a little more on your individual game. You need to make sure you're not always sacrificing for the team, but also set yourself up because I can also play good in specific situations and clutches and stuff like that. So I don't always need to die first. So I feel like that's something I learned in the FaZe as well. I felt the pressure was mounting so much, and I wanted team and the players to perform so good that I sacrificed myself way too much in the end. So like you always take something out of something bad, right? You learn stuff from it, and you know how to improve it in for the future. And I feel like I did that after getting benched in FaZe. That I wasn't really myself the last 6 months because of all the things that was happening and all the sacrifice I did as a player, right?
But truly speaking, like you're trying to perform like now individually better and whatsoever. Do you think it affects your calling, or because I personally think that? Well, go ahead. That's the way.
I think it does to a certain degree. That I mean, my team is always saying I'm really good at finding gaps. I mean, so I'm playing very aggressive. I get in position. I know exactly what I want my teammates to do, what time they should attack a different place of the map if I'm alone, because I can analyze really fast what's happening on the map, if they're stacking or what setup it is. And if I perform good in Vigil, I get those frags and it turns so fast, right? If I go aggressive outside as T nuke alone and I kill the guy outside playing aggressively, the whole map just opens up for my teammates, right? If I die, they clear outside, they stack A and ramp and they start blocking. So yeah, I mean, it affects my calling in that way that I can call on myself more and going out first, clearing angles way better than I did. So it affects me in a way, but not my confidence as a caller, how I read the game. It's more about if I get that opening for my team instead of dying getting traded, that just changes everything in execute, right?
I mean, it will also give you confidence in further calling, like for during the game when you win aim battles. You know how you can level your opponent.
Yeah, if you have 0-11 and you're doing calls and everything goes wrong and you don't get a kill, so obviously it's tough, right? I've tried
Also,
that a few times.
One last question to that. Since you're like most of the time the entry fragger first going in, and let's say it's X or Nix, do you, in this lineup, I'm assuming in FaZe the people were talking way more in clutch rounds, but do you like still talk and make calls for your team when you're dead, or do you let them play and Chris takes, for example, the lead with an AWP or whatever?
That's something that my team wants to do more in the beginning. Because I was in FaZe and when I was dead, I was only saying about grenades time, what I saw on other monitors. I was not saying what to do. In mouse, we discussed after a few months that I should take more over because of the way I can lead and I set up nades and people can do the executes, right? But I've always been a leader. I know what nades I can throw and how I set my teammates up, right? So if I'm not going in first, I know exactly what my teammate needs to throw for me for it to be a perfect execute, or I can set them up, right? So sometimes I do it, but also feel like in practice I won't do that much because I want people to learn to take initiative to read the game themselves. So when it gets close to tournaments, I start talking more, calling more, but always do a lot of dead talk. I get opportunities to teammates. You have 2 smokes, 2 flashes, stuff like that. I say so they can create the go themselves, because it's really hard for me to say how a guy should go in on B Inferno in a 4-on-4. If he wants to go before the flash or he wants to go before smokes or they want to do a Molotov execute, it's up to the players themselves. So Chris is helping there, but also feel like Raps has learned a lot over the last year to take more initiative in this lineup. that he previously did in his old mousesports, right? Because he was the rookie. Now he's kind of the star player and one of the most experienced player in the lineup, right? Together with me and Chris. So he's taking more initiative in that way, and I think there's a good mixture of me dead talking, but also Chris and Robin having some ideas during the game.
Nice.
Another thing is as well, when we were talking about the idea of having like big voices, etc., I feel like this is where European people watching the show actually will understand this more maybe than Americans in their sports. Because in soccer, football, where it's not as much about like, you know, hardcore strategy like the NFL or whatever. In that sport, people always talk about basically the idea of like, do you have the dressing room on your side if you're the manager? Do you have the ear of the players? Do they listen to you? And the problem is, when you described it there earlier, like if people don't get the timeline, because a lot of that wasn't like explicit when Olaf was out and no one knew for how long and why and is he coming back. If you think of the timeline, right, as you said, let's do the first period when you had Olaf Meister. As you said, you were in almost every final, you won half of them. Problem is, a couple of them were the biggest ones and everyone remembers the way you lost them because it was super close. So everyone basically just focused on the failures there, and understandably why, because you had in theory all the best players, so the expectation is you're not allowed to come second. You have to win them all, even though, unless you're Astralis 29, you don't win them all. Like, no one wins them all in theory. Like, it's just not normal. So then, you come to the period where you've got to stand in. First tournament, you actually beat the Astralis team that then everyone now calls the best ever, 3-0 in a final, best of 5. Everyone forgets that, of course, because at the time, you know, they'd only won one tournament. Then after that, still pretty decent as a team. You think Olaf's coming back. He doesn't, unfortunately, so you have to get another stand-in. You the other stand-in, you just trip over and win another tournament. People forget Team Liquid was in that tournament. Obviously, fucking the whole bunch of teams were in that. MIBR, whatever they were called back then, were in that. There was a whole bunch of like decent. And Big was there. Like there was quality teams. You win that tournament with standing. That's already insane. As LEGIJA pointed out there, like no other in-game leader's just going to use stand-ins and win tournaments. Like your style in some ways has worked for that, right? So then you get Olaf Meister back, and if people forget when you got him back basically for the major, right? I think you maybe got him back one tournament before or something. Am I right?
We had 1 week practice before E-League, the last tournament of the year before the break.
The 4-team tournament?
Yeah.
No. There was
Premier.
the E-League in June or July. There was.
Yes.
Okay.
After Cologne, we had Cologne with Kroman. We went to
Yeah,
semifinal.
it
Lost
was
to
the
Big.
4-team tournament, no?
No, you're thinking of the
that
one in 2019. This is in 2018.
Okay,
it was E-League Premier.
Yes.
There was
Yeah,
another
there was
one of the
like-
ones where Team
yeah.
Liquid just got beaten by Astralis.
I think there was only 8 teams in that
Yes.
E-League, and there was 8
Yeah.
top teams.
Yes, it was basically the best
I-
teams.
Yeah, we played Fnatic and mousesports. I think both teams were kind of top 5, top 6 at that moment. And we got Olaf back with 1 week practice. We basically found out at Cologne that he's coming back. And obviously the expectations that lined up, if we had a sports psychologist, he would probably say no expectations.
Yes.
But when we got him back, it was like, we're going to be number 1. Everybody have forgot what have been through 6 months, what tactics, whatever, right? So we go into the tournament, we lose 16-14, 16-13, 19-16, another overtime to mousesports and Fnatic. We don't win that map, but we lose really stupid rounds. Olaf is playing the best he has seen in years, like in mousesports. He played is really good, but everybody else was drained from the whole period of standing Olaf not coming back, practice or not practice, you know? Hold that period and suddenly we get Olaf back and the expectation is so high compared to the motivation. And that's where it goes wrong. It was so bad that tournament, and we go back and we have full practice for the major, I think, and that's where it all went to shit. Robin had to go home during the tournament because of getting a child, right? So at that moment, everything kind of went out of balance, right? And people have been probably talking during the break, should we play with Finn or not?
Yes.
So I think that's the time that you're looking at where everything goes wrong. Is that one tournament where we lose so close matches, not winning even one map, I think, and just go out and we have to break, and it's like, oh, there was a long period of time without Olaf. So when we come back, we're gonna win the major, and we just go 0-2, and frustrations are insanely. I'm saying to my team, you guys are not listening. When I say jump through a smoke, when I say it's Na'Vi, they like to stack 4 guys B. Question about should we go back to A or not? I say let's go back to A, rush A, and then somebody says, well, we don't have A control. You still want to do it? And I'm like, I guess not. Then we stay B and we go B. There 4 guys, and we lose 16-14. You know, like stuff like that. In that moment, 30 seconds left on a map, and me guessing myself there because of the pressure and the results are not coming. Normally in this scenario with mousesports, just say shut up, we do it. You know,
Yes.
like there's nobody will second guess me, and you probably just say no A control. I'll say okay, we just go anyway, but not like are you sure you still want to do it? This question is more like if you're doing it, it's your call.
Yes.
You know, like, and you don't need to say that. I will take the responsibility if it's wrong. But I know Navi, and I know they like to stack in awkward scenarios. And I just had this feeling. You have this as a caller, and I need to go after my feeling. And I explained to the team why I had that feeling and exactly why I wanted to do it, because I saw something that was not ordinary, you know. So at that moment, I told my team, if you're not 100% focused on trusting my call, it doesn't really matter if I'm calling. Then somebody else can just do it, because then it's just A execute, B execute, or mid control, and then we see what happens.
Because when I was setting that up there, like the timeline, we're actually like even the down period is like understandable. You're playing with stand-ins, you get a guy back, you have to bring in. By the way, it hasn't been playing the game in that time he's off, even though admittedly you're right. Actually, at E-League Premier, if you remember, you actually fragged out a whole bunch of series. The crazy thing about that, right, is when you set it up that way, you think of those players and a fan will think, actually, wait a minute, why the fuck were they so quick to make this change? Like, why would they take the in-game? Why don't they give it a few more months? But you have to realise what makes being a player so crazy is you're always just looking at the next game ahead of you. You live on the day to day. You're not thinking about last week, next week, because you have to win this match. You have to win the next match. You have to practice for the next match. So you're always like what in English you call myopic. Your like field of vision is very narrow. You're not looking at the bigger picture. It reminds me of a story I've often told on podcasts, because he doesn't mind me saying this. He's even told me in an interview. JW from Fnatic. When the Fnatic was just about to win Katowice and then go and become that era when you had TSM, when they became like the best team ever. They were winning most of right before they won their major, where they had Olaf and Crims and those guys. He was going to go and join NIP. And I was just telling this guy, dude, I know why you think this is a good move. Like, you think, oh, you know, like my team's like good now, but we haven't won everything yet. Like if I join NIP, you know, maybe I'll be like more of a star player. It's Forest and Get Right. And there's all these cool reasons to do it. But I said to him, dude, just look where your team is now. Because at that time, right, the only tournament since they'd made that lineup they didn't come top 4 or better in was the major where they forfeited the game after winning it against LDLC. Every other tournament, they were top 4 or they won the tournament. And I said to him, dude, You've gotten like into such a essentially like a spoiled position. You don't know that's not normal. Like you think like that you're going to go to another team and every tournament you're in the final, every tournament you're in the semi-final. Like that is actually like you might look back one day and be like, what the fuck was I doing? Like that was the best chance I ever had. So people don't get like it's a lot easier to be right near the winning position and change the one little thing than to go rebuild completely elsewhere. And then who knows what happens there, right? I mean, I've seen players take that for granted, and the problem is. It's two years later, mate. All I would say is this. If someone from FaZe Clan is watching, how did the next 2 years go? How many finals? How many championships? How many majors you have a chance of winning? How many rounds were you from winning a major? Like, I'm not saying that to be mean to them. I'm actually trying to tell them, like, you don't know how good you've got it sometimes, you know. Because that was the thing I never... Basically, karrigan, I'd set it up like this. What I never got is this. Because I have to be the historian, right? I've got my own perspective on this. Like, if I look at FaZe Clan, I have to treat you harshly, mate. Because if you have those players, we've talked about this, you have to win. Yeah, of course. Like, if you have those players and the other guy is like Fnatic who are working like old players, a young guy who's only just come in the team, yeah, I don't expect them to beat you every time. But in this scenario, right, if I'm your teammate, it's like, how can they not see what we're doing at that point in time? Because this is what I always told them. If they say to me, we've got to kick karrigan because, you know, we've lost faith in him, he didn't win the major for us, we had a few finals, I felt like, you know, he made a bad call in. If they stop there, I could say, okay, I agree with that part, but that's not how you make a decision, is it? Because when you change a player, you have to bring a different player in. So before I can say get rid of that player, I've got to know who we're changing him with, right? So if they'd said to me, you won't believe it, we've convinced Glaive to come over, I'd go, okay, I get it, right? He's the best right now. But instead, I remember this. I was going like, well, who's it going to be? They didn't even know. They didn't even have an idea. Like, and then you've seen since, one of the very weird things they did in FaZe was they just recruited loads of in-game leaders worse than you. They got fucking Neo. Oh, Neo, one of the best. Yeah, like 3 years after he was good. Like, they got a Dren, like 2 years after he won the major and was washed. They got Exist. Fucking hell, they got Exist. Even after Nip kicked him from me, it's like, what I can't get is, if they were doing that thing where you weigh something on the scales, how was the karrigan end the one that was the lighter part there, you know? You get what I'm saying? Like, I get the initial part of it, but I feel like they were very short-sighted in that sense. Like, can you explain it to us? What do you think what couldn't they handle about it?
I think they expected Exist, Gold, and Flusser to say yes. The day they decided to bench me, they asked all these 3 players, and all players said no. And those 3 could have been callers in FaZe Clan. And
I see. Or separately they asked them all, like not to join all three at once. So we're going to ask each separate to the IGL,
each,
right?
And that's what I heard. And I have a feeling that it was a reason for Xinged to say no, because he knew how hard it was when he was standing in phase 2. I was in room with him, and he said, "You don't have a easy time with this lineup." He said to me how hard they're to work with, how they react, and stuff like that. That's what he kind of told me in that back then. I think maybe that's one of the reasons he wanted to go back to Fnatic, because he had the offer back then. And he was still in Fnatic at that point, but I think a few months later he was replaced by Golden, right?
Yes.
Golden was in Cloud9 at that moment, together with Flusher, I can imagine it was something like that. But they were not willing to join FaZe Clan. And at that moment, when 3 potential in-game leaders said no, I think it would have been tough to get another one, right? So Nico just took over, as he did it while I was in FaZe Clan for 2 months, right? And we kind of won Epicenter with it.
Yeah, sure.
But I also think you underestimate that just because he's calling, it doesn't mean that I'm micromanaging small things happening on Mirage mid, right? I'm calling if he says mid control. I was calling where range should go, how it would flash for him. I would set him up in the round, and once we got in position, Nico would do the final call, right? So I automatically helped him calling that way, but he would do the final call if you should split A or split B, right? And here's the big difference. And I told the lineup that when I was calling on Mirage and we took mid control, and I will say let's do B split, Nico would hang around in A apps and ramp and lurk. But the second he was calling and saying B split, he would suddenly be in B apps. Suddenly the B split is way more powerful, right? Than the B split would have been without.
Yes.
So
he's there, exactly, yeah.
So now he will call on the feeling he had, but he would not lurk in that scenario. So obviously the cause is changing that, because he could set himself up. When I was not calling, he could just do whatever he wanted, how he could get the impact in round. But as a caller, he suddenly had to say, okay, now I go B because we are attacking B, we go together as a unit, and how we're going to do it, right? So that thing often changed, because there's not many demos where I call B split on Mirage that Nico's actually with us, because the same goes with Robs and Mouse, right? He's an insanely good lurker, so he has to lurk. I'll set him in that position every time, because he knows I always have that option to go back to A if something happens on B, a B stack or whatever, right? So that was something that changed, obviously. When I was not in the team, suddenly there wasn't a guy to kind of micromanage what exactly had to happen in that scenario. And I think at that moment when he got Adrian, I think a month or 2 later, he actually was in mid on Mirage, because he realized it's very hard to actually call the go when you are on different side of the map, like Happy kind of did back in the days in Envy, right? You need a secondary caller to take the lead and read and how to set up your teammates. And I think that what he underestimated in FaZe when I wasn't there, that the players have a lot of experience on how to move, but setting each other up, they have never meant to be that. In FaZe Clan was meant to be me setting everybody up in what scenario we had to do the splits, the executes, what the timing should be. It was all about me thinking that, and they could decide within their own decision making, should I go left, right side, should I hide for 5 seconds, then I go, right? So there wasn't much initiative in that way of micromanaging small stuff, but there was initiative in 3-on-3 is how you play the round out, but not how you get to the decision. And I think that's what's FaZe a bit lacking, and that's why probably also Nico had to do a lot of micromanagement in a way that he didn't kind of think he had to. Because when you look at the lineup, you imagine yourself you should micromanage, but there are small things you had to do to set them up, and then you can let them play it out the round. Because like I said, once you get in that scenario, come up, split A, connector, I'm done with calling now. Now it's all about how you play out the round, who's moving the right way, right? And sacrificing or moving for each other. And I think that was one of the issues, and obviously also Rain running in first instead of running second, so you lose a lot of firepower and frags from Rain as well.
The refrag isn't going to be as good, obviously. Yeah, exactly. No, that's one area where, like, this is one of the reasons why, I mean, we had a discussion about this on the last episode, LEGIJA, about, like, if Shox really had the mindset for it, like, surely he should be the best in-game leader, because, you know, his game sense amazing, complete game, amazing player. But one of the reasons why typically I don't want people who've been star players to be in-game leaders is exactly what he described there, which is one of the key things about the star players, like I said earlier, is I want to take everything that isn't them doing the specific job out of their mind. I don't even want them to necessarily know what I'm doing on the other side of the map. They don't need to know. They just know to go in at this time, who they're going in with, the order, what they look for, the protocols. They don't need to know that I'm throwing a flash that makes the person look away in the sight, you know, on the rotate, or that I put a smoke that makes them not have all the people there waiting for you. And so the problem is when they are then the in-game leader, first of all, they didn't know that existed. So they're just doing like that. They're going to an area and telling people, rush on away now. And it's like they just think that they think think it's like a little kid. They think like the fairies put all their clothes away at night. They don't know their mom came in when they were asleep and did it all. They're my clothes just go in the cupboards. You know, they don't understand the dirty work. And also, the real dangerous thing is what you described with that B split, is if they ever realise, well, I could actually basically, like, if I go in this position and then everyone does what I want, I get all the kills. Like, fuck, that's a really dangerous temptation to have, because what you can do if that happens is you can have amazing games, and at the end you turn to your teammates and go, what were you guys doing? It's like, what do you mean? We were doing what you told us to do. Like the whole point is, almost every good in-game leader I've known talks the opposite, like karrigan did there. It's like, here's what I gave up to make the other guy's game work. Even when he said, like, sometimes I'll take an AK and sometimes I'll call a little bit more for my... He didn't make like a big deal again. It wasn't like, I want full control. Yeah. So like, the problem is the superstar player can get lost in that. And the real issue is, think about the feedback loop he's going to get. He is fragging out. So he's going to think, this is right. What I'm doing is right. Like, if he was individually doing that would make sense. Like you said, if it was free play, he can do what he wants and he gets all those kills. He did his job. But he's actually, in a sense, only doing his job as an individual player. And he's actually failing as an in-game leader if he does that. Like, that's missing something about what it is to be a leader.
The only reason I'm stubborn really for Shoxy being an in-game leader is because I think that he, in his previous teams, he has always been micromanaging. I think also,
sure,
in many scenarios, and I just think that he has the abilities. And also, he is the only superstar player that I would say, besides Flusher, who I would say could potentially, in my opinion, be an in-game leader in future. But obviously, there's many other aspects into that, and you have to want to do it to be a good in-game leader. You have to be ready. And
I'll also throw this part in as well, because you've heard this in interviews from both Shox and Nico, and they're two of the classic ones that it was always a bit underwhelming with the leader. They always say in the interview, I don't even want to be the leader, but they never stop fucking doing it, you notice. They keep doing it over and over again. It's like, at that point in time, it's like, how do you manage to not want to be an in-game leader, but do it for 1.5 out of 2 years? Like, mate, you're not trying hard enough. Like, if I want to get out of a job, I'll get out of it quick. So what do you think on this whole topic, karrigan? It's obviously like a complicated thing. Where would you come in on this?
I mean, there's two ways to see, right? It could be really releasing the pressure that the community have on you, because if you say, okay, I'm going to be the leader of FaZe clan, the pressure is different than you saying, I'm just doing temporary. But the problem is, when it gets temporary over 6 months to 12 months, people start saying, now it's not temporary, now it's a permanent solution, right? So I don't know why they're doing it, because if you really take on there's nothing called I just take it because nobody else wants. Either you're gonna be the leader and you're gonna lead with as an example, and you're gonna do it and everybody trusts you. You're not gonna say it just because I had to. You have to have the passion to lead. And that means what I did back in the days, it was the same in Fnatic. When suddenly Xinged left to play CSGO with NIP, well, we were still playing 1.6. There was no even question. I said to the team, I'm just going to take it. Just leave it to me. I'll stand for the calling. Not about I can do it if nobody wants. And if nobody else can do it, I can do it. I just took it because I knew they needed another voice. And you have to be strong in that voice when you actually take over from a team. It's not like it doesn't have to be forced on you, but you have, if you know you're the right choice in your team to do it, you have to enforce it. And you have to live into the role and make them feel you're leading them and not just like leading them because you have to. I think there's two different ways to do it. And I think they both have some leader examples, like leadership qualities that you get. They have really good play style. They know how to move as a team. They understand the game, and they also have the leading personality. But if they don't want it 100%, it never's going to be 100%. And that's what I feel with Shox and Nico.
Well, that's what Nico said in his interview today.
Yes.
Or yesterday.
Yeah, but that's what I feel like. I have it like this, right? Either you're going to destroy a year or 2 or 3 of your career, or you're going to man up and take the job and just do whatever is asked for you. And I feel therefore you also have to say, okay, if it's on your own temper, I'm just going to do it onto my contract then. So I'm not going to renew it. I need an in-game leader before this, but I'm going to do it until my contract is over. So you have a timeline. Instead of this, okay, let's see if you get an in-game leader this month, maybe get in 3 months, maybe in 6 months. Just scratch that idea and just do it permanently in your head. But if you're doing temporary, it gets temporary and frustrating. Because then like, oh my God, when is the in-game leader coming, stuff like that. So I feel like you have to go all in on it. And also hope Nico did that in that period. I don't know him that good in the last year, obviously. But I feel that's what needed the passion and just like, okay, I'm gonna be the next best in-game leader in the world. Like a Blame F. Like Blame F is a prime example of he has the individual qualities. He said nobody else could do it. I had to do it, and now I love doing it. And I feel there's two different ways of how Blame F and Shocks, Blame F compared to Shocks and Nico, how they talked about in-game leading. Because now Blame F is thinking I'm the best in the world, right? And Nico and Shocks were never having this thought to themselves. And then you're never gonna be the best, honestly.
Yeah, I get you. Right, I've got a question. Listen, this has been a little bit of a different episode because usually we're just talking very theoretical. So we've got time. We'll do some of that. But one question I still have to ask on the FaZe topic. Just, I've got to prime it. I'm like one of those. I'm like a little fucking kid with the magnifying glass and the ants. Like, fuck it. What happens if I shine the light over? Oh, that's weird. It's all smoke and stuff. Oh, interesting. What happens if I keep going? So I can't help myself, mate. So here's the question, right? When you had this team with Nico, like you said, the success you had was amazing. In fact, here's the thing. I would get it if the people that thought you weren't that good was Olaf. He's won all the majors, mate. He's been in a better team. If it was Guardian's been in some pretty good teams. Like Zeus is a very good leader. Like I'd get those players, right? The reason why it shocks me that like Nico's one of the ones that like wasn't a fan. And in fact, quite recently, he did that video with Rivalry where, we were both apparently overrated, mate. I was in that video, bizarrely. So when they said karrigan, right, I even think Nico, here's what people don't know about Nico is, he's not actually a liar at all. He does tell the truth. Like, for example, I genuinely believe he does want to win. I think he even thinks what he's doing is the right way to win. The point is, I disagree. And so I think, he's misguided. That's the way you'd say it in English, And so here's the problem, right? When they said you and that, they said karrigan, and you're supposed to say overrated or underrated, and obviously you don't give a massive reason why, it's a quick show, right? If he actually was a guy like Fallen who knows how to play PR, the correct answer should be underrated, and if you give anything, you just say what the people want to hear, like you say, underrated, I actually didn't know, like back then, how good he was, I've learned a lot from then, and but it just wasn't the right time. That's how you would say it, like if you're a football player, a very professional way. But when he said you were overrated, mate, I almost flipped the fucking desk over, because I just thought to myself, you haven't even played with any other great in-game leaders. So overrated compared to what? Like, I remember there was once a story where someone went up, a newspaper guy, and he said to a politician, like, how are you and your wife doing? And the guy just said, compared to what? And it's like, that's the point. Like, what are you comparing them to? So on this angle, right, here's the thing. You've done the right angle, mate, to be nice. Every interview I've ever seen you do since you left FaZe Clan, you've gone out of your way not to say Nico was at fault or blame him or they should have trusted him. You've just tried to make it like you said here. Like you understand the situation. It was years ago. You learned from that. Obviously, you made your own mistakes. That were part of it. You've always owned that. But what do you think it is that they didn't get? Like, what does Nico not understand about what karrigan the in-game leader was?
I mean, there's more to it, right? Because obviously, I was in my best shape in that last few months, and I think also Nico kind of mentioned that I was overrated in the end of phase. But I also feel like Guardian made the same point in another video that they didn't help me either, right? Sometimes a player has a slump or in-game leader has a slump. You make everything sure that player is feeling comfortable again, right? And I wasn't getting any help from the teammates back then. It was just like I had to recover myself. And that was after a long period where I had to make new strats, new playbooks, new stuff. I was getting burned out, honestly. Because I didn't know. One day I was happy it was coming back. Next day I'm just like so sad he's not back. We have to keep playing with Croman for one of the big tournaments in the world, Cologne, right? Suddenly, and we make semifinal up and down, win a match. Somehow we win it. Then we lose full tilt again, It's a roller coaster instead of like a future with the team. And I think at that moment, I also couldn't work as hard as I normally do. Normally, I would work 10 to 12, 13 hours a day. I live CS. But at a moment where you don't see a future in a team or you don't see yourself finding yourself, you think to yourself, okay, I need to work less because I need to recover. I need to find myself. I need to be happy every morning I'm waking up. Because right at that moment, I wasn't happy playing. I wasn't happy training because we couldn't improve as a team. So yeah, my in-game leading dropped off, but everybody else dropped off individually as well. So it was more like, it felt like in the end, everybody else in the team did everything they could to become the best, but I slacked. And I completely disagree. I think everybody slacked. Nobody helped each other to perform better, right? And I mean, there was just so many scenarios where it didn't feel like a team anymore. We were discussing stupid shit like somebody's not playing enough, that's why he only has 10 frags and that's not good enough. I'm like, well, chill, bro. Everybody can have a bad day. It doesn't really matter if you played yesterday 2 hours or 1 hour. It won't affect you when you're at a tournament. We are so experienced that if you only play 50 hours per 2 weeks or you play 60, it doesn't matter in the end. It's about how you perform as a team. And I felt like I was blaming on small stuff, and it didn't feel like a unit anymore at that moment. So, like I said, I think I didn't work hard enough in the end, but I also think you should give me the goodwill and kind of see like, okay, nobody worked hard enough in FaZe Clan in the end. And therefore I should not be overrated, because I still feel like if I'm overrated, how can I beat them with a lesser team constantly?
Yeah, if people don't know, I did a video on this. When karrigan left, because people might not know this, even though, listen, the Astralis one, obviously overall they won that because they won all the fucking majors. Like, you can't say they didn't on that one. But head to head, people might not know this. karrigan basically has beaten his former teams like almost every time he's played them. He's lost very rarely. So he beat the Prime Astralis. The FaZe Clan one's the most ridiculous one, because when he had mousesports, we're talking, by the way, before they became good at the end of last year and all the finals, they were still beating FaZe Clan. They beat them at like EPL, I think Cologne maybe, like a couple of times they beat them, even knocked them out of tournaments. Then when they became super good, the mouse team, they went to the top of the rankings. Like, yeah, that's another reason why I don't get why all these years later they wouldn't come to that realization. Because think about this, right? Yeah, mousesports at the end of the year was like top 2 ranked or whatever, but you came from like, I think you were like 15th or something, you know, you were way down the rankings, you weren't winning tournaments. So if I can beat you with what you wouldn't, like put it this way, if I went before you joined mousesports and I say to Nico, fucking Olaf Meister, Guardian, do you guys want to recruit fucking Frozen and Chris J to join the team? They're not going to say, oh yeah, let's get him in now. So like, how can you then lose to those players and not think, there must be something else going on here? Like, they haven't just gotten 10 times better overnight, have they? Like, this is why players, I always say this to people, you got to take player opinions with a grain of salt unless they're the in-game leader. Because the in-game leader is the only one who properly studies the demo and looks what happened. He doesn't just look who did the kill. He looks, how did that guy get in that position? What did we do? What did the other team do wrong? Like, he knows what the game does because he looked at it like an analyst. The player has his own little vision of the game. He has his own little highlight reel he runs in his mind of what went right, what went wrong, and that can be, it's not that it's wrong, it's just they can only see from their position, as it were. You have any thoughts on the game?
Yeah, no, I wanted to point out what you said in the end. In the end, it's the in-game leader crafting the system, and he will be the guy who knows who will be good. Well, if he's crafting the system, he knows what parts he will need to fulfill his system pretty much. And I also think that the in-game leader, including the coach, these days, have the most saying about the team and how they want to structure and what players they should be picking up, and not just because you're the star player or you have the best stats or you get the most credit from your organization or whatsoever. You shouldn't have the saying. I think it's always the in-game leader and the coach who has to do it, because they're the guys who are making the system and have their plans in their head and know what player they need.
Put it this way,
I
have a saying I often say, right? It's like one of my principles in Counter-Strike. Listen, in theory, any team could win a tournament. We see it happen every now and then. One team, miracle win, and then do nothing after that, right? Maybe after that they drop off and you know, right, that was just a one-off. But here's the thing. If you are a team that has won multiple real LAN tournaments with like tier 1 teams, proper prestige, stage, it is impossible that a leader who wins multiple of those titles was a bad leader. It's impossible. It couldn't happen. Like, there's no players, like, even, like, I mean, I would just say, just look at even people like Simple and Nico when they're in, like, the best form ever. If the rest of the team sucks and the leader's not doing a good job and they don't win. In fact, everyone just gives them the MVP award and they came second or third or whatever, you know, and everyone goes, oh, poor Zebu, poor Nico. Like people, fans, because they have their own narrative, they can think, oh, that leader just won because he had those players. It's the same as that thing I said last episode. People say about Phil Jackson, karrigan, the guy who has the most NBA championships ever as a coach. They used to really say, oh, he just won because he had Michael Jordan and Shaq and Kobe. It's like, mate, a lot of people have the best player, they don't win. Like, it's fucking hard to win tournaments in these games.
That's true. Like, when you have so big stars and so big players, you also have to coach the person, not the player, right? You have to make the center. Obviously, they're going to be key pieces of your victory, right? They're going to be a key factor for your winning, but everybody else around them has to perform for them to perform at the highest level, right? And the same with Ghost and CS. It's like some players, like Sanji, is a vital part of VP and how the best players can perform, right? Tizian is a big part of how they perform really good, in my opinion. And these pieces are only as good as the other pieces, I would say, right? Because if you take Pederson out, you have a very strange role to fill in that lineup, who's never doing really a stupid mistake or he's doing the right timings, the right decisions. And it's underrated because that key frag can change around, that the star player in game is getting frustrated at how the team, we had the round in our hands and then you throw it like that, right? So obviously, if the best player in the world, in my opinion, also have the right surroundings to be that. Like Asai Wu is basically kind of set up in Vitality, but he's also setting up his teammates in the same way in another rounds, right? So it's a team game, and that's why Vigil never win all the big tournaments. Else Simple would have won everything by now.
Absolutely, yeah. No, by the way, that's another little... So what I try to do, by the way, because I'm a showman, I know what I'm doing. You don't just make a good point, you have to say it in like a way that people remember. You have to say it like in a way that sort of stands out. So what I always say is this. If someone's a really good, it doesn't have to be support player because people get triggered by the term. I say supportive element now, so people understand it's more like mindset and what kind of a role you're trying to play in the team. Someone who, like, I'll give you an example. Tizian, if he does his job, his kills, what he does in the game doesn't show up for him on the scoreboard. It shows up for the other guy on the scoreboard. So if you're the fan who only looked at the scoreboard at the end of the game and didn't watch the game, you think, his teammate did awesome and Tizian sucked. It's like, you don't know how many of those kills he got because Tizian did what he did. And that is always what will be lost, unfortunately, in the game because everyone's a prisoner of that fucking scoreboard at the end. Sometimes, I know you can't have it. Sometimes I wish there just was no scoreboard. I wish you just played and whoever wins the game, you know. Because then people would have to actually use their brain like we did back in the day and try and figure out what are they doing in the game. Well, we didn't have stats. You know, we don't know what was empty kills. We don't know what was lucky. Like, we had to actually decide for ourselves with our eyes who was good at the game.
Instead of some other bullshit they show sometimes on the games, they can have like 20-minute segment where they can actually teach the people who don't know that much in depth of the game.
For sure.
To show them and also in a certain way credit also this playstyle or give credit to this kid who not necessarily gets bullied on the internet for having negative stats, but you can just show people how much impact a player can have without having like good stats. And it's also a beautiful thing to show people who don't know much about Counter-Strike. It's a healthy thing, and you learn a lot from it. You learn.
I think, for example, the best way you can show the stream is like saying, basically, let's say a player, sometimes in a really good position, right? And he can't really do anything with a position because TT is not rotating. But TT kills one on long, does two as T side. The rotation comes, Santaris has 2 kills back, everybody say, oh, and same play by Santaris. But why did the CTs rotate? Because TT got the kill on long, but then he died, and they're coming out long, for example, right? At that moment, if you show that on stream, because of what he did in this moment and that kill, even though he died, he made that the other player got 2 kills and they got B on those 2 or 3, and everybody knows it's impossible to retake. So that's why they run around. Yeah, and I think that's the way you can show it on stream, at least, right? What one kill can change compared to the rotations. But the rotations right now, CT is so fast on some maps. People are all rotating at the moment, in my opinion, and just one kill somewhere can really just escalate a whole round, even though you die by doing it.
Here's a controversial statement, because listen, I haven't watched that much football, I'll say. I know I'm from England, but it's just not my shit, mate. I'm different. But I will make a football statement. Some people might think it's blasphemy right now, right? So you know when everyone does that thing where it's like, instead of like fucking Ziwu versus Simple, obviously in football it's Ronaldo versus Messi. And as usual, it can't just be that like even if you decide one's better, it's like there's one A and one B. Like they're so good, you'd have either, and either could be the best. No, it has to be that like whoever's good, you always say the other one's half as good. Like this is what fans are like. We all know that, right? Well, here's the problem, right? When people do that whole debate, because they're just casual fans, they do the same thing. They act like it's a 1v1 game and they can just compare Messi versus Ronaldo and they compare who won the championships, for example, right? Oh, but now he's won the Champions League, so he must be better now. No, the other one's better. And here's the fact that they don't think about, right? I won't comment on the whole debate. That would be a whole fucking extra episode. But here's the point I'm going to make, right? I don't mind if someone says Messi's the best player ever. Like, he is a fucking amazing player. And obviously, you can go now, type in Messi highlights, watch 20 minutes. And at the end, you'll say, yeah, he's the best player ever. Look how amazing. And all the highlights, by the way, because the highlights will be the ones where he takes the ball at halfway and he dribbles around 8 people and then he fucking makes the goalie dive and then he walks around him and kicks in the net, right? But what they don't show you is, like, that might happen, like, once a game. What happens with the rest of the football match, right? What they'll never show you is this. I just noticed as a pure layman watching the sport, that most of the period when Messi was dominant, not individually, he was always really good, but when his team was dominant and they won everything, he had a guy called Iniesta who played with him. And you know what? That guy was probably the best setup player I've seen in a long time in football. Like, that guy, that would be my dream. Dude, if I'm like, yeah, he was very good as well. Both of them were, mate. Their whole job was just feed fucking Messi, and then he's the best. So, basically, he's doing kind of like what we're describing here. Like, if you said, they know, like, I could try and score these goals. I'm fucking good. But why would I? Why wouldn't I just pass it to Messi in the last 5 meters and he'll just kick it in the net? Like, in that scenario, like, you have to factor these factors in. Even the best player, like karrigan said, is going to be even better if you set him up properly, if you cater to him, if you take away things he's weak at.
Yep.
I agree.
Right, let's do some other stuff that's not just all FaZe clan. People say it's fucking drama. Like, we tried to stay away from the drama.
It's every episode.
I know.
It's
okay. Here's one thing I want.
One by one, then it's fun to talk about.
Well, here's what I want to ask about, because obviously a lot of fans. I always say this. You have to remember, because CS is a massive game, loads of viewers, and obviously there's loads of young people coming in the game. Realistically, they probably, a lot of them only know like the last 2 or 3 years. Like, they're not going to know like TSM, Astralis, when you were in that team back then. In fact, some of them might not even know you were in Astralis. Like, they might think it was Glaive forever and, like just like that. So one of the problems I have is they try to compare this Astralis with your Astralis while ignoring that they played after they played with you. So in other words, they went through all those mistakes, learning experiences. They got to learn from that, and then they went and succeeded. So people will go, obviously Glaive's way better, obviously that team's better. It's like, here's the analogy. It's going to be harsh, because I do think Glaive's the best, by the way. I'll just tell you straight up. Like, I'm not going to fuck around here. He's amazing. But I have 2 things I always say. One, he's only been amazing in one team, mate. I've never, like, you can maybe say Western Wolves, but that was 2 months, mate. And by the way, that team collapsed instantly, and I knew all the shit on that team as well. But that's boring. No one knows about that. He's never, put it this way, he's never had a FaZe clan team and made all them the best. So here's the thing, he's the best in his one team. He's like Messi staying in Barcelona his whole career with everyone around him. It's always tailored how he likes. But here's the thing, like, right, the analogy is this. Have you ever tried, or maybe you know a person in your family, I won't say what type of a person, but there'll be a person in your family and they can't get the top off a lid. A jar, they can't get the lid off a jar. Could be jam, could be so. That's why I didn't say who it was, because, political and shit nowadays, isn't it? But you can imagine which person in your family might struggle to get the jar lid off, right? When they hand it to you and you pop it off, what do they say? They go, well, I got it nearly all the way off and you just took it off at the end, didn't you? I'm not hating, that's a joke. But in a way, some of that is kind of what happened to Astralis, right? Like, I'm sure all the times that you guys failed or you came close or you had success, that all goes in the memory bank. That's all part of all those players that we now acknowledge, Super Smart, Zipnix, Device, like, they're learning from all those things and they can apply it later. What do you think of this?
I mean, people have to have in mind that Astralis I left behind was not the same Astralis 6 months later, right? Just as I was about to get benched, we had a sports psychologist, and I think sports psychologists did do wonders in Astralis at that moment, because we had not the performance. We got scared in strange moments of tournaments. We were never kind of the same team we would win in semi-final or quarterfinal. Once it mattered, there was nerves. You could feel it. People start to play a little different than they used to, and I don't feel that in any other teams I had, but back then I could actually feel that I had to take over a lot in those games, right? It was the earlier Astralis you're talking about, when you just had these we were known as the chokers back then, right? Before I joined Dignitas was awesome. They beat everybody in the group stage. They go to quarterfinals. They make still a good quarterfinal, semifinal. They drop off completely, right? They never really made it to a final or won a tournament in Dignitas. When I came, I think it was the first tournament we won 3rd place against Fnatic, 3rd place decider. And then we go on to win, I think it's 5 out of 6 finals. Suddenly the confidence is there, right, in TSM. And then strange things happens. We underperform a little. We start thinking about changing players. We don't do it. Then we come in, we make Astralis. That whole period when we are doing Astralis, we were not sure if we had a contract next month. Do we have salary? There were so many things there before we did Astralis that kind of had a negative effect. And honestly, have been all teams in my career. Every time there's a contract negotiating, I swear to God, people underperform. I don't know what's happening. Every time there's negotiating happening, you're about to sign a 2-year contract, you have a good performance, and then suddenly you start these negotiating for a month and you just underperform. I don't know. It happens in every team I've been in. This month, I hate it. So I just hope it'll be one day for future tournaments or for organizations. But we get to this Astralis, we don't really perform, right? We're a top 10 team in the world. We used to be a top 4, constantly making it deep. We changed Kerby in for Cajun, I think.
Yes.
And at that moment, I don't know. It was one of the only times where I haven't studied a player before I took him. It was like a really fast decision we made because of the majors. We locked in and stuff like that. So I took in Kerby without really knowing what his role would be, right? And suddenly we had a huge role overlap. Kerby and Dupree is basically the same player.
Yes.
And I was like, this is not going to work short term if we don't switch. No, we need to make Kerby happy, so we moved Dupree around. The team wants to play it differently, and we are not connected at all at any point, right? And I think what I leave behind is them to rebuild. So they finally put Dupree in a completely new role he never played before, and put Kerby into this really important role, which is also why a few months later he got the MVP.
Yep.
But I didn't really get to work a long time with Kerby. I think it was 2 months. And with the sports psychology, I think that could have helped to get like a structure behind the team. It was really new stuff back then still, and I think we were just disconnected with the team. Like the way organization was handling things was kind of new, and us as a team, we were not having the same philosophy. Me, Sonic, Device, like we were the 3 key things in that. We didn't have the same way of watching the game, seeing the game. I'm very explosive caller. And you see Astralis is very methodical structure, how you play X on X situation exactly down, right? And I still always felt like if the player individually is happy in his position, he's going to perform the best. And that's my philosophy, and Astralis is kind of a different philosophy, I would say. So I already knew back then we had to kind of break it up because I couldn't get more of the guys. And I was even telling the guys, I think you should take Leif because he would be the perfect fit to come in and fix the situation with the team. And sometimes you have to call it quits when it's time, right? Because I had to change my own style and philosophy to get into to stay in Astralis, and I never think would have won a major because I would never be 100% happy and still believe in that way of calling. I had my own philosophy, like you said, Fern, right? I'm loose but also structured.
Yes.
I cannot give this loose part away from me because that's kind of been in my blood since 1.6. League, you probably remember I do some random stuff sometimes. I have to because it pays off. Sometimes you have to beat stupid with stupid.
I'll give you the best analogy. I'll use my own career, mate. Do you imagine, listen, if tournament organisers hire me, spoiler for idiot fans, they love it when I do fucking banter, but only when it pops off. They love it when everyone's liking the banter, when it hits properly. You create a moment. You're doing a great job filling dead air, for example. So here's what they would actually come to me. I'm not joking and say to me behind the scenes in the green room. If people complained, like I did a joke that people thought was too mean, or a player got upset and complained behind the scenes, like, he's making fun of me again, or whatever. It's like, you can imagine which little bitches would say that. Some of them are probably watching this episode. Like when they would do that, right, the TO would come to me and they would say to me something that shows the difference. Remember, this is ESL as well, a lot like fucking Germans. Like they're not creatives, they're like workers. They would come to me, LEGIJA, and they would say, can you just not say the jokes that aren't funny and that don't hit, and could you only just say the good ones? Because if you do that, then it'd be perfect. And I would say to them, like, that's not how jokes work, though. Like, I don't come with a notebook. Like, I'm thinking this stuff up on the fly. So the point is, like he said there, like, first of all, you have to give that freedom because I'm going to have to take chances, aren't I? Like, if I feel it and I hit it right, it's going to be awesome. But the problem is that means I'm going to miss sometimes and it's going to look shit. But you got to roll with it. You got to say, right, that's my style. That's what I'm owning up on that regard. And it's the same mentality that would allow me to make the hit that makes me miss after, if you know what I mean.
It's very true. I like the style actually. Like, I personally like the style of loose calling. And I think that in this meta right now, especially, I have the personal feeling that it's way easier to play this style rather than this execute-based style, just because I feel like that this game is so old now and people are so prepared and they have such a wide knowledge of like how to handle executes and whatsoever. I think it's way easier to set them up with defaults and grenades to punish them in their positions, because I believe personally that, for example, in Inferno, there's like certain setups you can only have in middle. And I think it's nice the way that you call. You play on your own feeling and you set your opponents up, kind of. But there's many callers, I think, that they do still today too much executing style, and I personally think, I don't know, not too big of a fan of it.
there's always one reason why I thought my style would be the right way to play, right? If you're
You
able
can
to
level.
play, if you're able to play structure, but you're also able to play loose. You can play a mixed style, you can play whatever, right? So if you play Astralis, I will never take the structure Strat Book out. I would play the loose style because that's how you beat the other. You're
Yes.
never ever gonna beat Astralis by having better structure. You can forget about it. So when you played those teams, that's why Navi and Navi could never beat it because they're also very methodical. But Astralis is gonna beat everyone in their ball game, right? So what you have to do is kind of push them out of their comfort zone. And how do you do that? By a really aggressive loose style where you really up in their face, don't respect their grenades, are not too scared, right? But let's say you play Fnatic, then you kind of feel like, okay, how do we beat them? We beat them as a unit, as a structure. We beat them by playing ABCCS, take map control good, don't give the individuals the performance because they could be in the loose style, the very explosive style, right? So if you're able to play both, but not to a perfection, you can always, as an in-game leader, choose, okay, we switch it up the rest of the half. Let's play execute style because right now they're stopping us, they're getting into the ones, and we are not really getting in the zone. So we go back to execute style. And that's for if you can play a middle ground on it, and you can never do it, but if you can play both ways, you can always beat the team you feel like watching the demon like, well, they're doing so many mistakes in their default. Okay, we need to punish by them playing better default than them. And that's what I do in demos. That's why I always choose different game plan depending on who we play. Are they having issues with playing against fast teams? Well, then you just roll the ball against them. Just keep pounding them. Are they good at playing against fast teams? Because you do the utility, you slow down, you play methodical, you play the time, and let them use your nades, right? So if you play both styles, you have always opportunities in your game plan. And that therefore I feel like that's really good to have.
You touched on one thing there that sets up basically, this is probably the most gangster question anyone can ask you, because if someone could even ask you this question, you know you did something. So I'll set it up like this. You're going to like this one, LEGIJA. Everyone knows, right? If I ask any little kid, who was the best team in 2015? They're going to go, I know, it was Fnatic. It was the Fnatic era. And by the way, they're right. If you look who won the most championships, you look who won the majors, you look who was number one most of the year, you look who was the best team, it was Fnatic. But here's the thing, and this is why whenever fans talk about like head-to-head is different from who's the best team. Because the best team is the best team against the field, against all the teams overall. Because here's the question I'm leading to, and this is why it's the most gangster question. So when Fnatic had their era, everyone said they're the best team to ever play. Remember, this is before the later Astralis team with Glaive and Magisk and stuff. So at the time, the best team ever, right? When karrigan was in TSM, I think the stat is he won 7 out of 9 best of 3 or best of 5 series that year against that Fnatic team. In the Fnatic era, he just used to beat them like for fun. Like, basically, here's the other way to say it as well. Know all the tournaments they won and all the times they made semis and final, like, off the top of my head, I've got a pretty good memory. I think they lost to Envy twice. I think Virtus.pro got them once. Aside from that, right, I think Cloud9 got them once. Aside from that, the only reason they didn't win every other tournament is because TSM beat them. So you alluded to it there. How do you beat Fnatic? You're one of the only people who knows, mate. How do you beat that Fnatic? Like, what do you have to do? How do you stop them? Because remember, this is when Olafmeister could just beat everyone. Flusher was doing his crazy moves. JW basically ruined the op for everyone by running up and just no-scoping people around corners, and Valve was like, this is overpowered, nerf that. You know, how do you beat that team, karrigan? What do you do?
Do you just play the structure? Like, for me, Fnatic was really good in the XNX situation, right? So if you wanted to deny that, you had to go very aggressive on the CT side to get as a unit and kind of trade off and force them into going faster than XNX, right? Because they were the best team in the world in these slow on X situation, a very explosive style, play the XNX, right? So you had to gamble a little more, but you also had to, when you took map control, you really had to use utility as T. You had to make sure you flash and roll all the corner, because if not, they just keep re-peeking. And they had a very specific style that made them, I would say, readable for me at least, in that scenario, that if you shut down for the Vigilist and you always try to have the numbers in your advantage when into map control, you could easily beat them that way. But we could never beat Envious because they were so aggressive. They were over-aggressive. So I couldn't counter that style with the loose style. And that was obviously an issue which I didn't have with Fnatic, because we played the structure style really good. And also in TSM, we were the best team with the structure. There was nobody really beating us in that. But we could not play the loose style as good as we could later in other teams. And I think that was the issue why we couldn't mix it up against someone else like Envious.
That's cool.
See, listen, I'll make a joke now. See, Nico, he had 2 styles he could play. You're still working on one, right? What? No, it's just a joke. He's in G2 now. He's not the in-game leader for now. Don't worry, boys. It's fine. I'm sure it'll be fine. It'll be cool. Stop. It doesn't matter. It's all right. Just forget. It's all just fun. All fun and games. Right. Here's the thing I want to ask also about TSM in that era. You alluded to it there. So you had Zonic, but again, this is where you can't compare something side by side when the second example gets to take advantage of all the lessons the first example got wrong. It's like the analogy is this. If some parents have a child, there's a concept, it's called like the little brother syndrome. With the first kid is the one they make all the mistakes on. They've never had a child before. They don't know how to get him to go to bed. He's being naughty. They have to learn how he goes to school. How much freedom do we give him? How strict do we? The secret is when you get the second brother, you can just apply all the stuff you just learned. Like, he's going to think, oh, my parents are cool as fuck. And then the other brother's going to be like, what are you talking about? They were super strict on me. It's because they had different experiences, right? Even though it was the same parents and the kids were in the same house. So karrigan had Zonic, but that was when Zonic had only just become a coach. He wasn't the Zonic of 2020 who's like a fucking mastermind with dossiers and knows his stuff. And also, hadn't won tournaments yet. He didn't have the same, like, the aura you can have as a coach when you've won. That's enormous. Like, people are going to listen, they're going to trust you. So what would you say about this aspect? Because you had Zonic, but it was a very different relationship back then, right?
I mean, we took him in Astralis, not in TSM.
That's right, yes. Yes.
And so TSM, he was still, I think he just started coaching Dignitas back then. And that's why we took him when his contract ran out when we made Astralis to get a really good coach, because I've been done all things alone there. I had an analyst or 2 back then, but it wasn't anything special compared to what you have nowadays, right? So I was all alone in that boat, and we then took Son again. I think at that time and he knew Kirby good, so they had a good relationship. He brought Kirby in later as well. So yeah, Sonic didn't have a big impact then, but also think he wanted more impact. But again, my vision and his, when it came he had kind of, as a coach, you have the player's ear, right? They tell him what exactly how they want to play as a team. There was some issues, and obviously he didn't feel good when he had to tell me, like, I need to call the way they want, or they have to bench me, right? And me and Sonic has been good friends for a long time. I played him in mousesports back then 1.6, right? So it was a hard time for him, and also never meant to be that I had to leave, but I also felt it wasn't right anymore. So I think he stepped into bigger shoes when I left, saying, okay, now you're in control, Sonic. You and Glaive is going to control the whole thing, where he was more in that period a supportive element to me compared to what he is nowadays. But coaches were still slowly becoming a thing there must be 2015 and 2016, right? It wasn't a big thing. The in-game leaders didn't still know how you should improve on a coach. What do you need the coach to do? Is the player doing the playbook itself? Is coach only trying to be there for the team and also just do anti-strats? But nowadays a coach is way more than that, right? So I also think he was the first coach to really take that coaching role into him and improve on that day to day. And therefore you can also see he's by far the best coach to ever touch CSGO so far, right? So he's a really good coach, I think.
Do you have any thoughts on that, on the idea of the coach and how they've been integrated in the game, LEGIJA? You obviously were a coach yourself at one point.
No, I agree, and I also see that Zonic kind of led by example with all what you heard from the players saying on social media whatsoever, with sleeping patterns and also work schedules, workouts and whatsoever. So I think kind of in general, this whole Astralis team in any aspect, they changed kind of the meta of how a team should work. Everyone basically started adapting towards to them. And yeah, I think it's interesting because I actually remember it was in Denmark. What was it? Odense. We had a talk in the talk in the car with the team driving up to the event, and we were actually speaking about this Astralis lineup and how much they actually have changed exactly during this time. The way of how a Counter-Strike team should work. So it was a cool thing. But yeah, I also think that also Zonic is pretty much the best in-game leader. And also, like you say, once he started coming into Astralis, the coaching role wasn't not even close to be what it is today. Today you have way more responsibility, way more saying. the organization is also supporting you much more than it used to back then. So you can have a lot more impact today as a coach on a team than back then.
Plus, actually, something you said there that is really key that people will miss is, as you said, it was actually around that time in the Astralis team when you got the first sports psychologist, but it wasn't the whole time in TSM. Like, obviously in TSM, you still like only semis in the majors, and sometimes didn't all like as I said, if you beat Fnatic 7 out of 9 times, the obvious question is like, why weren't you number one? But the point is, you had times that you broke down. And so here's one of the angles people don't understand. One of the people, I can ask him in interviews if you want, one of the people who will admit he gained the most from listening to sports psychologists is Device. So there's another angle where you can't pretend it's the same. Because when karrigan had those players, most of them were like 17 or 18 years old. And what people don't get is, like, normally if you're 17, 18, you want it to be like ROPS, where it's like, right, I'm in a team, but it's just top 10. Like, we make the quarters. That's okay. I'll learn how to play on stage. I'm not expected to win the match. Okay, then I'm playing against Fnatic. They're supposed to beat me. If you're in a team already that's like, everyone's telling you should win the tournament now, the pressure's insane.
Good luck, sir.
Yeah, like that's gonna just. This is why to me Ziwu is like an alien. Like, I don't know how this guy's handling this pressure and not like cracking in the big match. Not even that. He even has that whole thing of like the Messi Ronaldo, where all the simple fans want him to fucking fail. They're all waiting for him to have a bad game so they can say he sucks. So that is extremely rare. Normally there's a ramp up period to becoming a pro. And so another thing is, not only did Device work with this sports psychologist, and even in the Astralis with Glaive initially had some issues. People might remember, on paper, he should have been the MVP of that major, but he sucked so much in the final, and then Kirby just was so good in the final, they gave it to Kirby. If you look at the rest of the tournament, Device was like the best player in every series they played. Yeah. The stats were, he was like, at the time he was just AWPing as well, but he wasn't like AWPing in a system, he was just an AWPer. He would just go where he wanted and just kill everyone. This is what people won't know. I've told this story before, but I want to tie it in because I want to get karrigan's perspective. Back when you were in that TSM team, like, I used to hype Device just because, listen, I think I have a really good eye test. So when I pick someone, I think they're a star, I start building the story. I start telling fans, like, watch this guy. He's going to be something. Look at the style. Here's who he reminds me of. Here's what he could be. Now, here's the mad thing. I'm not joking, karrigan. Privately, this isn't a big deal. I'm sure you wouldn't be offended if I said this. I asked him in an interview once as well, Free League. I once said to Device, like, if you're the star, mate, you can't just go missing in all the semi-finals and finals. Like, I know it sounds unfair, but you have to win that match. And here's what he actually told me. He said, stop calling me a star player and telling people I'm a star player. I'm not a star player. I'm just a good player. And, Dupree's really good as well. Cajun's really good. In fact, in my team, we just have good players. We don't have star players. And I think the responsibility should be equal for all of us. And yeah, I didn't play well in a couple of finals, but like, who cares? Like, I'm working on it. I'll do things. Now, I'll just tell people a piece of trivia. In the Astralis team, where he has Glaive and they won all these tournaments, Device has won the most MVP HLTV medals in the history of Counter-Strike. So one thing he even said years later was he said he himself had to basically figure out what the concept of being a star is. Because the idea I was trying to get over him to was the responsibility. The logic went like this. Yeah, you know what? KGB's a really good player. You could go off on Dust 2. You could have an awesome day. But here's the difference. KGB can't do what you can do, Device. Like, you could take the whole game over, mate. You could be the best player against anyone. KGB has to hope it's a good day. Or he has to hope he's in good form. Or, he has to have his right breakfast in the morning or something. What do you think on this topic, karrigan? Because I know it must have been something you struggled with, trying to figure out what do you do with these players? How do you figure out who the stars are? What you do? One of your first in-game leader gigs, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it was like first time I actually in-game did a high level in CSGO. I was about to stop before TSM wrote me. So yeah, coming to that line, the pressure was high, and I kind of instantly saw Dupree and Device are kind of the main star players of the team, where the others would be the rock, like it's the double D combo, like we always talked about. And yeah, I mean, there was a lot of frustration with Dupree back then as well. He couldn't manage his anger, and I also think he manages way better now. That's also why he's way more stable. And I think one of the reasons, right, Device probably wrote that too, is trying to take the pressure away from them. Because the pressure was mounting a lot on them in TSM. Because we were playing so good, and then we couldn't really do the finish line. So you're looking to the star players, right? Because everything else works in the team. The strats, the way we play, we're getting situations. And Device normally has 25 frags, but suddenly has 15 frags, right? And you're looking to him, where's the star player of that team? So like you said, right, Cajun would have these Joker matches, Subnix, me would have these Joker matches. I also got one MVP randomly at FaZe League, right? So
Okay.
we had I don't know how that happened, but I got one MVP apparently. But then obviously the two players you were looking to was Device and Dupree, right? So you have them as the main carriers of a team. And I think they were too young at that moment to realize what is a star player, right? Because you never really talked about in the team that he is the star, right? We knew how to set up Device, and that was also why mainly we had an issue, right? Because he was insanely good luck. Like, he was so good at creating gaps, the timings with a rifle. But we had an issue who could play the AWP, right? So we split up the AWP on 3 different players. There was not a consistency in the team at that moment, and a coach like Sonic saw this, they put Device on AWP, and we need to figure out who can play Lurk really good. And that's where they got Maze and Cabu later to play these important roles where you find the gaps on the other side of the map, right? So there was mainly some issues in the team, and also think that's why Device couldn't perform as good as he wanted, because he didn't have a set role. Does that make sense? Because if you're a star player, you're like, okay, if you're Robson Mouse, okay, I'm the ultra lurk. I'm always gonna be in the clutches. That's where I need to perform. That's my goal. If the team gets me in the clutches, I win the round for the team. Where Device was sometimes anti-fragging, sometimes AWPing, sometimes lurking, right? So suddenly you have a very, very hybrid role where it's hard to perform constantly because you're not in the same situation. It's not like practice day out, day in with an AWP, or day out, day in with a lurk. You get 100 possibilities during a practice session. So I think by Device getting the AWP, I think he found himself in a situation, okay, to be the star player of the team, I need to perform with an AWP. I need to learn, nerd, anti-strat, everything I can about this role. How can I be the best AWP in the world? And I think that's where he found himself not where he could finally perform on the high level constantly. So I think it was the role switch that did it, to be honest.
How old was your Device during this time?
Like I said, I think 18 maybe.
18?
19, 20 maybe. There was a pretty young team I was in, actually. Cajun and me was old, but we were like 25, 26 or something. And the rest was like 20, they were still in high school kind of thing, both of them.
Yeah.
Like, so there must have been like 18 to 20, Supnik's, Device, and Dupree, right? So they were still young, and it was still a new scene. There was no coach, no sports psychologist, right? It was all about me, and I have never lead on a high level in CSGO before, right? It was a completely different world for me as well. I was not supposed to be there. I was supposed to finish my studies at that moment.
Another thing as well, this might shock people, because the one guy that no fan will ever talk shit about is Zipnix, right? Because here's the thing. Not only is he, like, obviously an amazing clutch player, like I always say, he's one of the only players I've ever seen where if he's in like a 1v2 and he doesn't win the round, I can still sometimes say, like, I did everything right there. Like, you know, you just don't always get the kills. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it just looks like he's a computer just calculating like a robot, like, yep, that was the right thing to do, and it works, it doesn't. So the problem with that, though, is because that's what he's famous for, clutch rounds. And every game isn't, you don't just get to play 10 clutch rounds every game. You get clutch rounds every now and then. You have to be in a very unique scenario. It means that it's like, in a way, you can actually sometimes get overrated because in the other scenarios, no one notices that you just died and they took the site. Like, it wasn't a clutch round. So even though I agree he's an incredible player, what people won't know is this. Zipnix wasn't the same Zipnix when he was in your team. In fact, a classic piece of trivia they've all forgotten, karrigan, because it's a move that never happened, is for real, TSM was going to kick Zipnix out. His form fell off and he kind of was like lost in the team, right? And didn't you guys literally tell him basically, I think it was something crazy, like the rumour got back to him before he was even kicked, like, shit, they're going to kick you, dude. I can't even remember who you're going to recruit at the time. Someone, it might have been Nico to get up or something, wasn't it?
No, it was AC.
Easy, there we go.
Performing really good in Dignitas back then. Was like top 10 player in the world, and Sirius was falling off. But that was a strange month there because he finished high school in May, and like when you have a school and you have CS, you couldn't play all the time, right? And then suddenly he was off school, and those 3 months he underperformed. Like, I don't know what, it was insanely how much he dropped off, right? So we had to decide to do something, but we didn't go through with it because it was too expensive to buy AC, and we kind of gave Supnix a second chance, and since that he has performed really good.
Yeah, he's basically never been bad since. Yeah, exactly.
It felt like you light some fire on his ass, and he just started to perform way better.
Yes.
This guy is insane in clutch rounds. It's actually fucking unbelievable.
It's OP as fuck, innit? That's why one of the things that people don't understand is people try to... I'll give you an example. There's a famous saying that says that, like, a joke is like a frog. If you dissect it and cut it up, it doesn't work anymore. So what happens is if you try to figure out like the mechanism why it worked, the joke, it obviously doesn't work at that point. Like it just works. The point is it just all fits together, doesn't it? That's what a team is like. So even though, because we're analysing and we're trying to be fans of people, and analysing essentially literally means like breaking things down, like picking them apart. When we pick them apart, people do the mistake of thinking, it's why people when they kick have that meme, except it wasn't a meme, they all believe it, of like, he was the problem. If that guy leaves, he was the problem. Because they all think that ultimately, if they pick it apart, there's one player that's the best and he must be why they win. And when they lose, it must be the worst player made them lose. And they don't get that even though definitely they're not all equal. Like we can have a hierarchy. We can talk about modelling of teams and stuff. But one thing they'll miss is you do need all these elements to work at the same time. Because I'll give you an example. If Glaive is the greatest in-game leader ever, and it's not even a discussion, we're not even going to have, I'm not even allowed to name other people because he won all the championships. Well, okay, then let's talk about Device. No, but Thorin, Device won all the MVP, so he's also like the best. Oh, fucking hell, all right. And we'll go to Zipnix, where he wins all the clutches, so he's the best as well. It's like, what? How many bests are going to be in one team? Like, wait a minute, aren't they all helping each other, guys? Like, that sounds pretty good. Like, you know what? If I'm Glaive, I'd love to have an AWPer that can just move around the map by himself, kill everyone, and then a guy at the end of the round who wins all the clutches for me. You know what? My job's getting fucking awesome. Like, I could still call the best strat ever, but I'm going to win more rounds, aren't I? So... what do you think on this topic, LEGIJA and karrigan? Because it is obviously very hard. This is why people do it, because obviously they're not in the team, so you can't really know what everyone does, can you? You're just guessing from outside. But like a team is really, it's a very unique thing that you can't really describe unless you're in the team, because you don't know who did what, you don't know what contributed. Like I said, the thing about Tizzy, and you don't know whose frags technically with the other guy doing something. It's a mystery in some ways.
I mean, you can not really, but kind of compare it to a FaZe team. What you say, like you have the best clutch run player, you have the best AWPer. FaZe also had all these attributes, but you still have to manage to work out or let all these skill sets that you have in each player, make them mesh well together in your system and use them at the best way you possibly can. And that's also a very big skill point as a team, not only as an in-game leader or for the coach, as a team to make that work. So I think... I think it's just an incredible amount of work, and the approach of work how this team has or had also in the past is just different from every other team. And that's why also what I said earlier, they led by example, and many teams just adapted to how they approach things.
What do you think, karrigan?
I mean, you're asking the question, how can you call someone the best in the game, right? If they're playing the best team in the world and everybody's best in their role, right? That's kind of what you're asking for, right?
Yeah, sort of.
So, like, I think the best example is, like, you can say it to soccer as a coach, right? Every team, top 10 team soccer football club in Europe has really good players, right? But obviously the coach, and in this way, the in-game leader has an impact of how can you mix these things together. But how do you know if the coach could do the same over in another team with different players, but kind of the same qualities of players somehow, right? But sometimes you have a unique situation like Astralis. They have 3 players played together for 6 years. How do you understand each other? You don't even need to communicate anymore, right? You have so much experience. You have so many bad results. You have so many good results, right? But if you get a team, in my scenario, that let's say 2 of them never become number 1 in the world. One day you wake up, you're number 1 in the world. You have never experienced. If you wake up and you call yourself the best team in the world, how are you going to react as an individual who's never been there before? Are you going to work harder? Are you going to be a little lazy? How do you react when you're the best team in the world? Are you disrespecting your enemies? I respect them even more. Stuff like that, right? And that's why with Astralis, every time they become number 1 and they fall down, they know how much it means to them to be number 1. They have so much motivation. They enjoy being number 1. They know, okay, we're not here forever, but once we fall down again, we'll do everything to get back in the top. And with young players, for example, and I think that's what you have as an in-game leader in different teams, that every team is so much different. Like I've played with, I think, top 10 of the best players in the world during the last 5 years, right? If you look at all the names I played with in TSM, Astralis, and also now here in mouz, it's like all players are different. They react differently when you're winning and losing. And I think it's very hard to go from one team to another and do the same over again. I'm not gonna talk myself up, but I just like example is Alexi B did it great in Lens, right? But look how long time it took for him to get OG up now, right? He's still not hitting the number 1 spot in the world or number 2 like he did with Ents. It's hard to do it all over again, and it takes so much motivation to do it. So by far, Glaive is the best in-game leader in the world. I have as the goat of in-game leading, right? But I also hope one day we will see another team with just the same qualities but different team. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Because I think he could do it again. Because I feel like I have done it, not the same way Astralis been an era and stuff like this, but I've done it in like 3 different teams being top 2 in the world for a couple of months, and then obviously drop off. But like I said, every team is different. They handle it differently. That comes down to experience, the organization, the players, right? Everything is different, and I just think Astralis has so good structure behind them in that matter of fact, and they have so much experience. They know even if they're number 10 in the world for 3 months, they have so much confidence because they've done it over and over again, the same core coming back to the top. So they just say to themselves, okay, now we work 10% extra the next 3 months and we're going to be number 1 again. And you can't say that to a whole new lineup.
Yes. Yeah, I'll give you the football analogy. If you want to use managers for in-game leaders, it's the discussion of who's better, Alex Ferguson or Jose Mourinho. Well, yeah, Alex Ferguson,
done it 4 times or something.
Mourinho went to all the different places and did it, but then Alex Ferguson stayed in one place and did it. Now, what's cool about that is both are really hard and they're totally different.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's my point. I still believe Glaive is the GOAT. Like, how many majors he won, how many tournaments he won, right? But, I mean, from my perspective and my experience, the situation I experience, I learned so much for every new team I go to. I become better every day in a new team. I see how Robs is clear angles like I've never seen anyone do it. So I start doing myself. You know, you copy each other in a team, and by doing that, you learn so much more as well. And you just, it's just different from every team. Like, you have to change your style of leading. It's not like a player goes to another team. Nico goes to G2, he's gonna be Nico. He's gonna be the lurk. He's gonna be how he wants to play. But as an in-game leader, you go to a team, you're not getting it 100% your way you want. You're not gonna get the players to buy 100% into what you want. You need the players to kind of meet you halfway to get the best out of him, right? And suddenly you are facing new issues, young players, experienced players, slumps. Like, it's so different in different lineups all the time, I would say.
One player I'd love to ask you about, because crucially he's just left mousesports, so it's okay. He's in a different team. By the way, he's getting mega paid, so I'm sure he's in a really great place. Is Woxic, right? Because I've told this story before on Counterpoints because it's just so fucking funny. Right? Raging, R.I.P., gone now, sadly, you know, we'll just remember the good times for all. Right? When Raging was still the manager, he told me a hilarious story about Woxic where he just said, because I was saying to him, bro, how the fuck is he AWPing with that sensitivity? Like, if he's that good, why doesn't he just use a low one and be like the best AWPer? Because by the way, if people don't know, go look it up. He's using like a disgustingly high sensitivity.
1600 DPI and 3.4 cents.
So here's the story. Here's the story Raging told me, right? He said, here's when he realised how ridiculous it is if you can use that sensitivity though. Because he said, right, when they were doing a practice and he first joined as the coach, that Woxic was watching Ali on train, the back alley area, and he was watching it with an AWP, and so Raging said, right, which side are you watching, left or right? And he just said, yes.
Yeah. You have to understand this way, right? When we're boot camping, I see 3 bottles of water on his mouse pad, because you only use 1/4 of it. It's insane. And yeah, like, obviously, like Alan said, he just says, I have everything. I think there's one clip on Mirage that's ridiculous. He's jumping out B-apps on Mirage as T-AWP, and he's basically spotting short, kitchen, B-apps, and long. From bench. He's basically have everything, right? And
yes,
his sense is insane, right? Like, you can't flash him basically.
He turns away when he's scoped in. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I don't know. I tried with when I played a little OP for mouse. When the flash comes, I'm like, well, I'm too old for this. I'm just
of course. Dude, imagine that, LEGIJA.
If I flash bang, I'm dead anyway.
He's
right?
the only AWPer where when he's scoped in, he can just turn away from the flash still. That's so OP.
Yeah, it's like he doesn't even scope out to dodge it. I've never seen anything like I played with Guardian and then I played with Woxic 3 months later. Or it's so different. The way that the Guardian is doing slingshot is like he's dragging his up the mousepad from one corner to another to do a short one, and Woxic just does like with a finger like this. So it was so different to see 2 complete different styles.
How did you try to use him, though? Because another thing that's weird about him, right, is, put it this way, you know what, in honour of the fact that Sean Connery just died, I'll tell people, there's not a lot of, like, real men left in the world, right? And I'll tell you what, if you like a man's man, like Sean Connery, Woxic is a man's man, because I'm not joking. Here's the other thing. I don't know if it's because he's Turkish as well, but I've stood behind this guy at tournaments, and he would actually do ridiculous shit out of movies. Like, he would just say to you guys, like, bro, just give me fucking up. Like, go mid, like it's a movie or something, like, and just go and kill 3 people. Like, how do you use a player like that?
I mean, he's very hyper aggressive, right? So again, when he came into the team, I make sure how the other wants to play. I give him freedom for a few months. Like what I always do when I come into the player, I learn the person first before I coach him as a player or a person. So I let to see what is he doing, how is he thinking the game, how is he moving around, how does he react to different stuff, how does he throw flashbangs, how does he react towards criticism, how everything you have to take into consideration before you kind of work with the player. But he's a very specific guy that kind of need to do these aggressive peaks, and I let him do that, right? Because that's his trademark. If you start telling him not to play aggressively, you are not gonna get what you need out of over him. He needs to play aggressively, right? So there have been a few key issues at key tournaments where I told him, where I'm basically sitting down, why are you re-peaking right here? Right at this moment in a 14-10 round, Symbol has an AK in Vietnam on Inferno. You give him a chance to win a round. Rest of Navi has Deagles, right? Suddenly we die, they have an entry, and we lose the game 6-4 to him. I'm not saying we're losing because of that round, but that's one round where I'm going to tell him why you're doing it. Yeah, I kind of felt it, you know. And here comes the trade-off, right? Because I let him feel it as well. Because if he doesn't feel it, he will not get into that zone where he plays at his best. But there has to be some kind of trade-off the other way where he says to himself, okay, not now. This is way too key round. Let me just play. Let us win as a team. And I think one of the things that was hardest was he came from Hellraisers where everything was based off him. If he didn't perform, if he didn't overpeak, they will lose the round by tactical or by the teams outplaying him because they're better skill, right? He had to perform and he had to be over-aggressive. He had to carry the team. And I told him he does need to carry the team. Doesn't matter if he has 30 frags or 20 frags. We as a team are good enough in every individually to win the round. And not by ourselves, but win as a team. And there was like a few more situations where we didn't really meet each other in this scenario. So I try a longer time to help him fix that. Because he is a very aggressive. And sometimes if you're too aggressive, you take the possibility for other players in the team to perform the right way, right? If Robs is all the time, if we, let's say Voxic is dying a few times, we are 4-5, my calling changes suddenly, Robs can't lurk because I have to execute, right? But if it's a 5-5, I can let Robs really lurk and I have the opportunity to go back to another side of the map. So it's a trade-off where you have to meet me halfway. And I felt like in the end, he also underperformed in the end, I would say, compared to the level he had, because he was a key factor to our winnings. I think Robs and Voxic was the key thing to why we performed so good, especially at the end of 2019, right? So it was a big drop-off, and there was some issues with the team as well. So in the end, you need to use him very aggressive, and you have to kind of say the way, okay, sometimes it's 4-5, but most of the times you're 5-4 to a team.
It's kind of a similar approach. I got a flashback to what Malek said, Thorin,
about Kenny.
Remember.
Yes.
About Kenny S, yeah. To make him feel, and he made a mistake. So Malek said basically he involved like special rounds for Kenny to play, to be able to play aggressive. And Kenny at some point learned that, okay, once he suggested, Kenny, do you want to play an aggressive round? Kenny said himself, no, I don't think it's a good moment to do it. And I think it's
here was different. When I said it, he just said, yes, I'll fuck him, you know. and he would just go out. And I think one of the Ober's unit issue was Simple. I think in some way, strange way, he was respecting Simple. Where I feel like Voxic could beat everyone on the day if he just believes. I think his playstyle is based off his confidence. If he goes say he will fuck him, he will fuck him. Honestly, like that's the way he does some, I would say, stupid peaks. But if it does it with confidence and with this sincerity, it somehow works out. And I think that's what you also need to get out of him. You cannot control him in that way. He has to play his own flow of the game. But I also think what happened in mouz, he would understand, he needs a big understanding of how the team wants to play that round. And he has to also adapt towards that, because he as a player, if he is 100% well meshed into the adaptation and how the team wants to play, he is by far top 3 AWP in the world. I couldn't get out of him. But maybe someone else can. Maybe he learned a lesson. He's still young. It was like kind of the first big team he was in, right? And he performed, and he became number 8 in the world in top Hill TV rank in 2019, right? It's a big step suddenly. And obviously there's some confidence things and stuff like that can happen to a player when that happens. But in the end, he's a really great AWPer, and obviously I would still play with him if everything worked out and it didn't go so bad during these Corona times.
And then obviously, as you mentioned, the other big player in mouse that was instrumental in the success and MVP was Rops, right? There's an interesting angle on this one as well that people don't know. So here's another one of my sayings that encapsulates something in like a pithy way. So we know when fans say what you said earlier, like they're pro players, they know how to play the game. I agree, right? All pro players at the top level know how to play the game. But here's the saying. They know how to play the game for themselves. They might not know how to play in mousesports. They might not know how to play in Na'Vi. So that's the challenge, obviously, the coach and in-game leader have. So tell us this story. You've told it on a few shows, etc. But I think for this conversation, it's a really good one because it's another example of how some players you turn loose and it's the opposite. You tell them, no, listen, I'm giving you everything, bro. You do everything you want. But Robs was a very weird example where what he thought he should do, the example you gave was Mirage, where he thought on CT side, he's Rain. That he's just going to play like the ramp area on A, and he's just going to, well, I mean, in that position, unless you are in from like late 2017, you just kill one person and then they refrag you. That's what happens. That's how the Mirage A site works when they run out. So basically, the best player in Lurker, probably X on X player on the team, is dying first every time they go A on Mirage. So instead, they had to tell him, LEGIJA, even though that's what you want to do, if we can put you here, I think you put him, what, Catwalk at that point in time? Was it Cat?
No, Connector,
sorry, yes. They said, we put you here, you can like get this frag, and control the game, you're rotating. Like, tell us this story. Like, what was the epiphany here? Because you must have, like you said before, you wanted to let him do what he wanted initially, right? To learn about him.
Yeah, so you have to think it this way, right? We are a pretty young team in that scenario. Robs' role has always been in the old mousesports. He is kind of just a quiet guy, just doing his own thing, playing A-side Mirage, and just kind of adapting, right? He was not taking decision initiative as he is now, but I needed someone else to step up in these scenarios, right? Doing the right decisions in Connector. Connector is incredible important position. That's not just about aiming. It's about positioning, flashbang, team play, communication, stacking A on the right timing. You have insanely responsibility there, right? Frozen played Connector, and he is a skilled player. He knows when to do what, and he will. But he will not understand the game yet like Robs does. He's trying to read the game, right? And I needed Robs to be more activated on the CT side and not only playing the echo position, right? Especially the Mirage, I felt like, or me and the coach, and I felt like it was the right position where we could try to force Robs out of his comfort zone. And he also agreed it would be nice to try something else because everybody knew how the end he played on a Mirage. But I think what have happened really with Robs the last year I've played with him, he has really evolved into, I would say, close to kind of all of personality. His way of reading the game, he comes with ideas, he say, hey Finn, let's do this. And he just goes out on nuke at the first guy, flashing in, jumping through smokes, and just goes full crazy. Because what he has been reading during the rounds. So he starts actually, and I didn't have that in the beginning with Robs, but he started to acknowledge like, okay, if I want to go somewhere, I need to tell Finn how to set me up. So he came with the idea to me and said, like, if Robs is saying it, bro, it's 100%. He's a machine. He wants to go for it, we let him go, right? And the same goes with AWPer. So there is two players in the team I would always give the go ahead for. Where they say I trust it blindly. So that would be Nico Guardian in FaZe, right? Nico, I say, let's go up A. I have a good feeling. Okay, we just do it. Or Guardian saying, I want a PK, you just do it. So I always have two players that give blindfold trust to. Because if they have that trust that they can say at this moment, I want to do this, and I call it, they feel like, okay, now I'm going to prove myself that this is the right thing to do at the right moment. And they get involved in the gameplay as well. That means suddenly it's not the way I'm thinking. If suddenly I have a bad feeling about their game, I'm not really feeling the call, suddenly Robs comes with a call out of nowhere and said, this we can do right now. And I think that's really underrated to have a team, not kind of a secondary caller, but players take initiative because they see something they can't explain on 15 seconds.
Yes.
And I think that's why I feel like Robs is evolving to be kind of Olaf players, and he's still so young in his career, bro. Like this guy is the most hardworking guy I ever played with, and I can tell you I play with a lot of guys. The way he works is different. He doesn't just play FPL. He sits, suddenly he meets up to practice one day. He found from CT Spawn on Vertigo, he can smoke B lobby from 3 different positions. He just does that himself. He comes to the next practice, start doing stuff, and we all look at him in Spawn. He didn't even say anything to us. He just starts walking Spawn, throwing smokes. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, you know, like that kind of personality, he will do everything also to win. And I think in his age and his motivation, he's going to become one of the greatest. In 5 years, everybody's going to talk about Robs. Because being a star player in a lurking role, bro, it's impossible, because if it goes really good with the team, you're never going to get 30 frags.
Yes.
If it goes bad in the team, yeah, you're going to get in clutch scenario, you're going to be like a kind of a beta, but that's how we set him up, because in my opinion, he's the best lurker at the moment in the world. Rifle lurking, decision making, small sides playing. He is the best player in that scenario right now, I feel like.
It's crazy from how fast this kid actually has evolved from playing FPL. When was it?
Insane.
2017?
Yeah, this has been in mouse for like 3 years, right? This is only pro team. And he played with Chris Xinged, leader Sonny, and then me, right? It's not like we've been through like a Danish school with Hund and Katie and Asilian, you know, like through all in-game leaders. Yes. So I think the first time he's actually playing with a real in-game leader, and also think he's evolving. And he also talks towards me back. Like, he comes to ideas how we can improve, right? And I think that comes with the confidence. He is a position where everybody listens to him in the team. Like, he's a surf god, he's an aim god, he's a smoke god. Like, he's good at everything, right? And he actually starts becoming good in understanding when to call what. And that's what I also see, like, he's a complete player right now. That was what I was missing 1 year ago from Bots, but he's definitely stepped it up now, because he can do crazy moves in every aspect of the game mechanically, but he needed that experience more, and I think he obviously got some from how I read the game and how he understands, and I think he's just the most complete player I have seen in a while in that regard, with so short time I worked with him.
Yeah.
To me, that's actually the biggest area that is still, this will be like the last thing. That's the biggest area in Counter-Strike that is untapped, that we haven't yet like dove into. There are still star players. I'll give you a spoiler. We might have mentioned some of them earlier in the show. There are still players who literally, the reason they're the best player is they're just like amazing talents. Like, they can just play an FPL, keyword play. They just play the game. They do the scrims. Yeah, if they're at a boot camp, they watch the demos, but they watch the demos with the coach and the IGL. Like, they watch what he's showing them. Like, here's the tactic. Here's what the opponent's going to do. But what they don't do is what a professional sportsman does. They don't go in the demo themselves on their own and do their work. And that's why when you tell me that story about Rops, dude, that's exciting. Because I know he has the skills. If I know he's studying as well. When I heard that story 2 years ago about how Device was looking at heat maps of the other AWPers to figure out where they're more like that, that's where you get really excited, because that's where you can max your potential out. Like, I won't say names, but there are some amazing star players where I'm not joking. If you ask them at an after party, like, do you ever watch demos yourself? They'd be like, nah, why would I do that, bro? That's the coach does that. And it's like, mate, if you just studied it, like in the NFL is the best example. If you're like a wide receiver or a defensive player, right? They just study like all the matchups they're going to get. And they look at what there's that guy's tendency like, right? If he's leaning on this foot, I can get him on this route on the right, you know, like they need to know that, because they're already good. If they have that extra knowledge, that's like the cheat code, dude. Like,
so they have like massive registers to learn even.
Yeah, and the whole thing is you're just asking them to learn only in their position though. They don't need to learn everything for everyone else. Just get your role. What do you think about this, karrigan?
I mean, the best example for me is like kind of to describe Robs is like, I will just spend time to finding grenades and execute and stuff like this. But I know if I find some Robs, he'll do it his own way anyway. So I just tell him, you're just going to stand here, you can find your own mark, and then you throw smoke, and within a few minutes, he find it already. Or if not, he'll find it for tomorrow. So that's because he has a talent for the game, but also willing to work his ass off. He's living CS, right? And if you have a talent, and you're basically living CS, you don't care about anything else, you are going to perform on a high level. And I think that comes down to mentality. And that's a thing you never know from players, right? You don't know how Robs will react if you're number one. Will he still work hard? This guy's going to work hard 24/7. You know that. But other players you don't know, because the moment you reach the top, you don't know how it feels to get all the way down. And I think the best thing that could happen to me was that actually Robs got to the top with mousesports, was amazing player, ranked top 20 in the world, but made a huge drop off, had a slump in individual playstyle. But I came back in and he knew how hard he'd been working for like 6-8 months to get back a level, but didn't get it. But I come in and he kind of believed in everything again, right? And now he knows that he needs to stay on top of his game all the time, and not into the same situation he did with the old mousesports where he's kind of dropping off individually, right? But right now he's performing out of his mind for, I don't know, since day one I arrived.
Yes.
And that's what I mean. Yeah, sorry, Finn.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. Like, I also try to coach the person of Robin. Robin is a very specific person. I'm not going to tell him when he does a mistake. He knows already. If he even does a mistake, right? Because often he will tell how we did a mistake as a team or how we moved, because he doesn't do mistakes. And it's not often to say about that about a player, but he does 99% out of 100%. He does the decision well thought through. There's not a reason why he jumped through the smoke unless there was a reason for it. And we explain you in detail why he did it. And that's why, therefore, I'm never touching Robin the way he understands the game or anything, because he has a very unique way of seeing it and improving all the time himself. So I'm never going to question him. And I think that's very unique to a player, and that you always can trust working hard.
Have you ever had a player like this?
No, never. Not in this way, right? I had players playing a lot FPL.
Yeah, of course.
But this guy is working differently. Like, he's playing DM, aimbots. I know at bootcamp, he's just sitting aimbots, then he watches some TV show, then he sits aimbots again. Yeah, he just sits constantly playing, right? And he just comes in, looks at you, saying, I'm ready to play. He goes and he just starts tapping headshots. He has a specific gift to this game. That's how I see it. And he's only 21 now, 22 maximum. And he's like, when he get also to play another players in the lineup, right? Right now he's the experienced player, but let's say he get to play with other players he can get even more experience from, right? Because he only played with few experienced players, if you ask me. The old mousesports and me. Rest is actually players under his experience level.
Yes.
That means what he can learn right now is self-taught. And that's unique, because normally you would learn a lot from other players. So right now it's just self-taught at the moment, the last 1.5 years.
I have one player that I always compare him to, or two players that I always compare with each other. It's Robs and Elish, kinda. Because I always have the same feeling of them, very, very hardworking. Elish, obviously, he's been playing like professional, like StarCraft and whatsoever. He knows how to work for himself, and he always reminds us for some reason of that. Obviously, they don't play necessarily the same role.
No, I can see it. Like for example, super smart guys, like also like really like chill personalities. Like you almost have to push them to be a star player, you know.
Yes.
Yeah.
I like that.
That just reminds me when you talk about that, because like I say, it's an exciting prospect to know someone with talent's working that hard. Everyone knows that famous saying, right? That goes, hard work beats talent if talent refuses to work hard. But they all stop listening after that comma. They all go, hard work beats talent. And you normally just tell it when you've got bad players, right? You try to tell them, like, look, guys, if we work together, we can beat fucking Simple if we like to. What they don't listen to is, I need the star player to listen to that. Because if you listen to the second part, unless talent works hard, bro, if you're the talent, you can't be beaten if you work hard. Like at that point, you got the game on lockdown. That's the dream of every in-game leader and coach, is that your star player, they want it like you do as the in-game leader. They're in the demos. They're in their own demos, though. They're in their opponent star players' demos, everything, getting all that shit. This video was kindly supported by Dean Tanglis, Pronogo, Alexander Rao, Andreas Kroknes, ErikHillestad, Hades, JDubs, the Puyallup Tribe, Tobias Bernasconi, VatriSam, Xinged, James Pederson, and as always, a special thanks goes out to my boy Jerky's Minion. Would you like to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Do you want to ask a question in my monthly video AMA? Do you want teasers? See who the upcoming guests are going to be? Maybe you'd like to take part in one of those monthly donated discussions with me about esports. Well, put your money where your mouth is and join the Screwluminati today in the Patreon link in the description box below.